Non-public session.
Second.
All right. Kelly, will you please take the roll?
Yes, Mayor. Mayor McCaffrey,
Here.
Councilor Kelly is absent Assistant Mayor Kelly is absent this evening. Councilor Tabor,
Present.
Councilor Cook. Here. Councilor Denton,
Here.
Councilor Blaylock,
Present.
Councilor Bagley,
Here.
Councilor Moreau,
Here.
Councilor Lombardi.
Here.
Before we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, did want to, I guess it was 2 weeks ago tonight, but Chris Rice, who passed, there was a great celebration of his life. And he meant a lot to the community, meant a lot more to his family, Megan and their 2 kids, and just wanted to take a moment and to express our council's condolences. And I know that the rec board will be taking up any naming projects, and I know that a number have reached out on that for the skate park. But we appreciate all that he's done, and we miss him dearly. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we have Crossing Guard Appreciation Day. Pretty excited about that. Before we get to public comment, I know that there's a number. We have acceptance of minutes. All right. So I would wait a motion for the acceptance of the April 21st, 2025 City Council meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So before public comment, and I always get this wrong because folks want to sometimes speak before they hear something, or sometimes they want to speak after. We can't do that both ways, but we're going to invite the folks from the DOT for the presentation up before public comment. So if you haven't signed up for public comment, I'll recognize you and you can speak to that, but that way you can hear what's happening in that presentation and then speak to that. Really excited, and I know that, and former Mayor Rick Beckstead noted to me that this was also Nurses Appreciation Week, with Nurses Appreciation Day happening on Tuesday. So it's a busy week, but now we have Crossing Guard Appreciation Day. 2 weeks ago, 2 young men presented a petition to this council. They brought signatures from 354 students from all 3 elementary schools, the middle school and the high school, asking us to consider making the second Tuesday in May Crossing Guard Appreciation Day. As they put it better than any of us could have, the purpose is to show the people who care about us that we care about them. Tonight, we are honoring 10 crossing guards because those 2 fifth graders, Theodore Porter and Owen Beer, took the initiative to make something they thought should happen a reality. Next Tuesday, May 13th, will be Crossing Guard Appreciation Day in Portsmouth because this council agreed with what the petitioners had to say. As I said at the time, everyone here on the dais knows we have a boss, and that's the most important job in the city, is to be that boss, to be a citizen of Portsmouth, if you're a 5th grader or anyone else. We are here to serve you, to work with you, to keep Portsmouth's door open. Hot sunshine or frozen mornings, you make sure to accomplish your given task. We applaud you and ask you here tonight so all of Portsmouth can share in your applause and public recognition, and thanks for all you do. Thank you. And so I have here, hopefully in alphabetical order, first we have Susan Carroll. Susan, are you here? Come on up. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Sean Corroy is not here tonight, but we'll make sure that we get this to him bright and early tomorrow morning. Jennifer Cook, are you here? Thank you very much. Laria Crosby, are you here? All right.
Thank you.
I don't see Beth Dinan here tonight, but we will find her on her route. Daniel Gerard. All right, Daniel. Thank you, Daniel. Thomas Kelleher, are you here? Excellent.
Say hi to your wife.
Marie Nelson, I don't see Marie here. Lauren Roberts, not here as well. Joyce, hey. You, not at the cross intersection. So Joyce is ours at New Franklin, but love you all. Now, I think that we don't always have as many people that that when we honor actually show up, and I would like to think it's because of the honor that we're giving, but I definitely know it's because of the work and effort that went in to this on behalf of the students and all the work that went in. And so we're so grateful that you guys could all be here, and you're there every morning. The rain, the sleet, it seems like it rains forever, but it's something, I think, Joyce catches Aurelia when she's running down like a bat out of hell, coming into Dennett Street. And as a parent, it's something that you, I don't know if you take for granted, but you certainly appreciate knowing that the kids are safe. And we appreciate all the hard work that goes into that. We know it's not easy. We know that the cars often are driving a little faster than they should, but you guys are always there. And so if we could just take a quick picture of everybody up with the council just right in front of the dais, it would be great.
Your Honor, if I can thank Mike Casad and
Oh.
Lanny Fasano for their leadership of this group. They've been wonderful behind the scenes, so thank you both.
And we do have stickers.
I'm fine.
Oh, right in the middle. Yeah, right in the middle. I'll go on the other side.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Thanks so much, guys.
There, can I give these to Mike?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. And you do serve our city enough. Don't feel as though you have to serve as a citizen and stay for the rest of the evening here. As I stated at the beginning, I'll wait a motion to suspend the rules and bring forth the presentation under Section 8, Number B, U.S. Route 1 Corridor Improvement Project with David Smith and David McNamara.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I know that we have a different individual.
All right. Good evening, councilors and residents of Portsmouth. My name's Hans Weber. Dave Smith, unfortunately, the project manager, couldn't join us tonight, so he sent me instead. But we've got, again, Dave McNamara here, who's been involved with this project for a long time. He's going to be providing most of the meat of the presentation tonight. I'm here mostly to offer pleasantries on behalf of the DOT. So just to reorient yourself, since you might not have been, exposed to the project since we were last here in November 18th of 2024. This project is concerning US Route 1, aka Lafayette Road, in your community of Portsmouth. The southern limits begin at approximately the intersection of Ocean Road and Longmeadow Road and proceed northerly about 1.7 miles to the intersection of Wilson Road. Next slide, please. So tonight, we're just going to step through this quick agenda. I think we're looking for about a 10-minute presentation, and then we'll open it up to the public comment. Dave will be providing the roadway alternatives review, the project design updates, what's occurred between November and now, and then we'll talk a little bit about the next steps in the schedule for the project moving forward. Our goal for our presentation here is to provide an overview of the design refinements since our prior City Council presentation and discuss the next steps in the project development process. A critical aspect of this coordination is to collect insight on the proposed improvements from the city officials to allow the project team to progress forward with the current proposal. So I'll go next slide, please. And we'll skip one more, and I'll invite Dave up to speak. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Hans.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you, councilors. My name is Dave McNamara with Stantec, and I'll walk through. Hans said it'll be a pretty quick presentation. Really want to kind of update you with what's changed since November, where we've been kind of focusing on after that meeting. So just to start, kind of recap the concepts that we've been looking at as the project has gone along, going back to some of the earlier concepts that were developed back in the 80s. And we've really landed on this alternative 3, which is we're looking at it as kind of targeted improvements along the corridor. So it's some of the intersections, improving some capacity, the roundabouts at White Cedar Boulevard and Springbrook Circle, and then outside of the roadway corridor, if you will, the multi-use path. That's really what's kind of settled out as the preferred alternative through here. So next slide, get into the corridor. So as Hans said, we started at the Ocean Road intersection. You see a little bit of work to the south of Ocean Road, but this is really the southern limit of our project. We haven't really made any changes down here in the last few months since what we presented back in November. Some lane capacity improvements at Ocean Road just to get through that signal with a second southbound lane or southbound with a right turn lane coming through, but then single lanes going north. So then in the next segment this is kind of the center area. You got Walmart up to the top underneath where segment 2 is, and then the Springbrook Circle intersection. So these are the 2 roundabouts that we had presented back in November, and we presented at a couple of the different, at the PAC meetings and the public informational meeting last summer. The one change here that is happening, it's not reflected here yet, is we are going to a single lane northbound through these 2 roundabouts. So you see the double lane north and southbound on these 2, looking at the traffic numbers, talking with the PAC, talking with the public. We can make it work traffic-wise with a single lane going northbound like we are at the other intersections. It's the southbound traffic that's actually a little heavier in the peak periods. So that will make it a little easier for pedestrians trying to cross Route 1. You'll have a single lane crossing on the northbound side with just the 1 double lane crossing of the southbound traffic. Save a little bit of impact, a little bit of pavement as well. So that's one change that's in process and will be reflected on future plans as we go forward if we keep this as our preferred alternative. The next slide. So in here, you got Water Country at the top, kind of Campus Drive over to the right. No real changes in this area. They're really transitioning into that 3-lane section that exists today as we go north. Just in here, it's really just kind of confirming the new pedestrian crossing in the area of Campus Drive. We show it here right at that intersection. We've had some discussion somewhere between Hoover and Campus having a pedestrian crossing in there with some sort of a pedestrian type signal, depending on where it lands. So we'll continue to talk with the city and some of the stakeholders about the best location within that area, but there does seem to be a lot of support for a new pedestrian crossing, especially where the controlled intersections are pretty far away to the north and the south through here, and access to the facilities down Campus Drive. So that's really the change there. And then kind of the meat of what has changed since we were here back in November is really this Hoover Drive through Wilson, the northern segment of the project. So we'll start here. We kind of split it into two. So Hoover to McKinley is what you see up here. And really the big thing that we've changed is as you come through, there's a little bit of a curve as you come around and past Hoover as you're heading north. We flattened that out a little bit, and we've shifted the Route 1 to the west. So we've moved Route 1 about 6 feet to the west, which has pulled that whole infrastructure up and away from the residential properties along the easterly side of Route 1. So it creates a lot more space over there and allows all of the facilities to be built within the existing right-of-way. So there's no permanent encroachment on any of those residential properties along the easterly side of the road through here. The other change that we made in talking with the PAC and our last PAC meeting came to a compromise, is to narrow that multi-use path along this stretch of property on the east side of the road. So for the rest of the project, we're looking at a 10.5-foot wide multi-use path, which basically is going to have a 5-foot bike lane going in the direction of traffic and then an adjacent 5-foot sidewalk. So through here, the west side will stay the same with that full multi-use path. On the east side, we'd narrow that down to an 8.5-foot path. So you'd have bikes and pedestrians being able to use it. It would be a little narrower. It wouldn't have that single direction, but it does peel away some of those impacts in front of these residential properties and creates a little more space between the buildings themselves and the new infrastructure. So that was supported by the PAC at our last meeting. So it just gets a little bit more space in that area away from the residential properties. Another discussion in this area, just quick one, is just that Atlantic Orthopedic. That site plan was approved with a right turn in. It seems like in the last resurfacing of that area, it wasn't striped back in. We're holding it there for now. You know, we will talk with planning department. We'll talk with the Atlantic Orthopedic. They paid for it as part of that approval. If it looks like the traffic, it's not going to impact the traffic, and based on the actual usage of that right turn, we can eliminate it. We will eliminate it. If it's still necessary as it was projected at the time of the site plan approval, we'll put it back in. But we'll look a little bit more at that. We're showing it as going in, but we will look at the possibility of removing that as this moves forward, if the need is not there. So the next slide. So then this is the far northerly section. So this is McKinley heading up to Wilson Road at the end. So we're tied back in at Wilson Road. So the alignment's back on where it is today. So we're not doing a lot of work at Wilson. We're basically tying in as we go through that intersection. So that shift is coming back in and coming back to the kind of the existing alignment as we go through McKinley. But a couple of things down here or up here that's changed. So we've taken right now that second northbound lane picks up in the area of McKinley. So as you go through McKinley, though, it's starting to widen out. The second lane isn't delineated yet there, but the pavement's starting to widen through there. In terms of just the kind of the peak queues that you see at northbound at Wilson Road, we pushed that second lane further to the north to get it away from McKinley. So now McKinley only has that single northbound lane to kind of contend with as you're turning in and out. It also picks up 12 feet of real estate, if you will, in front of those first 3 or 4 houses as you go north from McKinley. So then about halfway through, you can see we're kind of back onto alignment. But because in this area there is an existing sidewalk today, there's a grass panel and a sidewalk, so that 8.5-foot panel does fit within the existing right-of-way. So we're able to put the 8.5-foot panel, the utility and signage panel that goes behind it, that all fits within the right-of-way once we narrow that multi-use path down to the 8.5 feet. So we're able to get all the permanent infrastructure into the right-of-way all the way through to Wilson by narrowing that a little bit, even as we hold the existing alignment directly into the intersection. And then as we go through it, our intent is to improve the sidewalk to at least match into the kind of newer, cleaner sidewalk that came down from the Cumberland Farms development. So at least that sidewalk on the the east side beyond Wilson will get improved. That's kind of broken up now. And that'll be the limit of the work here. And then next slide. And so basically just looking ahead, we're at the identify preferred alternative step. You know, we're hoping to have some direction, some input from the city on whether the city supports where we are, where we're headed. The intent is to try to go to a public hearing in the fall. That'll be a more formal public hearing process that'll find for the necessity of the project and allow us to move into the final design phase of the project. So as you see there, we've still got a long ways to go. There's something like 80 properties potentially on here that would have some level of impact. A lot of it's temporary, some of it's permanent. So we'd have to work through an extensive right-of-way phase with that. You know, final design phase, there'll be permitting in there. So we're really looking out 4 or 5 years to potentially get into construction from where we are now as we go through the schedule. And that's what we have. Contact information is here. Dave Smith, myself, you know, certainly if there are questions as you go forward, and happy to take any questions now.
Thank you, David. Are there questions from the council? Councilor Tabor?
When you narrow the multi-use path down to 8.5 feet, is that done equally between pedestrian and bike, or does?
Yeah, so it won't be a defined path like the multi-use path we're proposing elsewhere. We're going to have kind of a defined, whether it's painted or different materials, is going to be a bike path and a pedestrian path. There'll be some distinction to show that. In this case, it'll be a wider sidewalk. So bikes will be able to use it, pedestrians will be able to use it, but it will be more like the multi-use paths that are out there now, you know, the little segments that are built. It won't be a bike side and a pedestrian side. It'll just be a full multi-use.
Councilor Cook, then Councilor Denton.
Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you for the presentation. Are we widening the pavement for cars still in this area for the length of this change? This is something that I have a particular concern about, because whenever you widen a road at all, you increase speeds. This is residential, specifically in that area between McKinley Wilson Road and further up the corridor.
Yep.
So are we widening still the roadway itself from where we currently stand?
No, so everything from Water Country to the north, it's a 3-lane section today. We're proposing to put a 3-lane section back. The lanes will actually be a little narrower, I think, than what the existing lanes are. The shoulders will be more consistent and defined, but the capacity of the road will not change. There's no extra lanes up in that area. At some of the intersections, as we go further south, and we're connecting, like today, where you go from Walmart down to Heritage, and you're kind of narrowing it and widening out, we're going to have more of a consistent second lane southbound as we go. It picks up at Water Country where it picks up today. It carries through to Ocean Road.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Denton.
First, to build off Councilor Cook's point, I'm a fan of narrower roads than even keeping the roads the same width that they are. But just to reiterate what you said, am I correct that from Hoover to Wilson, the residential property will not be taken, for lack of a better word, opposed to prior plans?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so the way it is, at the southern end where we have the shift, the back of that 8.5-foot multi-use path, I think is about 4 feet beyond the existing edge of pavement. So it's still well within the state right-of-way through that area.
Thank you.
Councilor Moreau.
You talked about doing something north of Wilson as far as the sidewalk to match up to Cumberland Farms. Are you doing anything to the other side of the road, or are they going to be completely mismatched?
There is nothing in the current scope on the west side, like in front of that Market Basket Plaza.
Right, so there's nothing to get them down unless they go all the way around.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything in the future? Any other possibilities?
I think I'll let Hans deal with the
Future past
the
2030?
scope. I don't think there's another project in the future, whether or not the city wants to advocate to potentially add a sidewalk over there as part of the project. I think that's something that would be entertained.
Just because it's so close to the grocery store and whatnot.
Yeah, no, I think there's certainly a logic to extending that, but that's not.
Thank you.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor, again. Sorry with another question here. Another way you can reduce speed often is to plant tree canopy close to the road. Is there room to plant trees between the sidewalk and that narrower section where it's only 8.5 feet and the roadway, so that maybe you can create the idea that the road is narrower?
So there's some opportunities for that. Right now, the way we've got that residential section in particular set up, no, we pushed in part to get that multi-use path as far away from the homes. We've got that up on the curb. In other areas, we have shown that with that 6-foot utility panel for poles, for street signs, that kind of stuff. If that sits at the curb line in front of the multi-use path elsewhere, then there is room for some landscaping and some, green elements, if you will, in that area. But I think for that residential, at least the way we have it now, the intent would be to have that multi-use path kind of as far away, which puts it at the curb line.
Councilor Bagley?
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to thank David and the team. I was one of the council representatives on the PAC group, and there's been a lot of work put into this. There's been a lot of adjustments to the plan, significantly, I think, moving the roadway away from the residential properties so that we don't have to encroach on their property in the manner that was originally proposed is good. This has been several decades in the making based on the history that I've heard. I think we should push forward with it. It does provide a very significant portion of the town with a pedestrian bikeway chance to get downtown, and I don't think that should be underlooked or overstated. It's not a perfect plan because the roadway was there long before we could account for all the challenges that we'd face in today's day and age. But I think the project has evolved into a great proposal that I can support. It's albeit not a perfect proposal because of the constraints of both financial and just inherent in the property that's available for us to work with. But I do applaud the efforts to listen to feedback and to make that significant shift away from the residential properties towards the commercial side of the road.
Okay.
I guess on that topic, David, are we at the limit of moving to the west on the road?
Through there?
I guess I'm looking at segment 4 and then, segment 4, or I guess I'll use the, from Hoover up to Wilson.
So I think the challenge at Wilson is if we're not kind of back to existing as we go through that signal, then all of a sudden we're now getting into that signal. We're just starting to chase the project further north.
Sure.
So the two curves kind of at McKinley and at Hoover are a nice spot to be able to shift the southern half, if you will, of that northern section. It could probably shift a little bit further through there. We're starting to get, I think the alignment will get a little wonky if we go too far west. And then we're also going to start pushing into, we're encroaching on the properties on the west side as well. That, one thing we are looking at on the west side is the potential for some sort of a stormwater treatment basin. We're going to need a good amount of stormwater treatment along this corridor because there really isn't anything today. Yeah. So the further we push west, we do start to constrain ourselves a little bit in some of those other opportunities that we're going to be needing.
Yeah, there are, I messed it up and I lost my place there. But there certainly are commercial properties. There happen to be fewer properties, though.
Correct.
So that's in terms of a positive. And then the work that we could do would be, we say that there's, if the city were to invest in something like a sidewalk down, one of those properties, that would be helpful as well as part of that. So as we get to, is there a way that we could and I'm just asking these questions now from mostly out of a place of ignorance, I suppose, but could we push the separation of the back to 2 lanes on the north bound side further up closer to Wilson, or do we need that? I guess, like, if it's possible to move that forward, we could save more of the residential space there, potentially for trees, and then we'd also have, the ability to shift it further into the commercial because there would be a natural point to come back. Is that something that we could consider in terms of when we get back to 2 lanes?
Yeah, I think we can look at if we came through a little further north than McKinley, try to keep that westerly shift going a little longer. We'd have to kind of reverse curve back in to match at Wilson, if I'm following you correctly.
Yeah, well, I guess, like, because the project stops right before the intersection at Cumberland Farms, we're in a position where, like, I feel like if it went all the way to that intersection, we might be, talking about something else where it was shifted more dramatically to the west. But
Yeah.
because we have to align that, seems like that portion of it is, like, I just hope that there's a way that we could figure out what this is from a mind of, certainly the public hearing and also just the process of dealing with all of the individuals on this side versus the commercial entities that we would obviously be doing stormwater improvements that they would benefit from and be significant projects. So if we could think about what it would look like if that last section that's not having any sidewalk done on it right now, and I know that we have to cut it off at some point, but if there was a way to think about it, to have a more dramatic shift to the west there, considering that, the edge of the Market Basket parking lot is far less intense than, somebody's front porch in terms of currently utilized at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. There is kind of that pad between the wall and that parking lot and the edge of road right now up through there. I mean, I think part of the challenge is also going to be budgetary. I think as we go through there and then all of a sudden we've got to completely rebuild the Wilson signals, if we realign that much to the west and as we start pushing it, then it's, we're just kind of adding to that project. But we can certainly look at continuing that westerly shift further to the north, see what it would look like to go through Wilson, and see how that fits into the overall scheme of it.
Yeah, and I appreciate being open to something like that, at least to cost it out, to understand, what would be in the 10-year plan, what would not be in the 10-year plan, and then from a standpoint of time saved from the public necessity hearings. I feel like that would, it would be interesting to see if that could wash out at the end in terms of time saved towards completion of this. But that's, I guess, the only question I have in terms of, and I'm sure we'll hear from the public comments after this. Just to note for the public comment, because public comment, how this works, you're not going to be able to ask these guys, but if we didn't ask a question that we should have, we'll make sure that we get your questions to David and also Hans. Councilor Lombardi.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the questions that has come from the public is that of access out of the driveways, where you have a roundabouts instead of traffic signals. That keeps a constant flow of traffic. And what those people have said is that the traffic lights allow them blocks of time to be able to get out of their driveways. Is there a way to mitigate that problem?
So I guess it's there. I mean, the Wilson signal would still be there, so you're still kind of getting that from that southbound side. On the northbound side, you are starting to get a little bit of ways from that roundabout, the Settlers Green, Springbrook Circle roundabout there. I think we can look in a little more detail as to exactly what the traffic through there is, but it's going to smooth it out, so it won't create the pure pods that you sometimes see, but at the same time, it will allow, I mean, people still should be able to get out because it's going to process that traffic through, coming out of that roundabout. So I don't see that as a major concern, in part because of that distance. You're going to spread that back out a little bit as you move away from the roundabout, and then the southbound traffic's still going to have that signal, still going to be working off that signal. It also creates, the signals create some gaps, but then it also just creates those pure pods of people going all at the same time, whereas it really isn't. I mean, the traffic flow out on Route 1 for most of the time is not just a constant flow of, cars just back to back to back. There are gaps in between those cars as they flow through there. The signals then kind of jam them together, and then they move together. But I think there's enough spread in that traffic that even with the roundabout, you're going to have gaps in it to get through.
Councilor Moreau?
Sorry, I have one more question. Do any of the, especially the one by Campus Drive, but any of these crosswalks like by the traffic circles, will they have like the flashing beacon lights that people can turn on so that they can get across more safely?
Yeah, so the intent at the roundabouts would have like those RFBs. So those are just the pure flashers. At Campus Drive, the intent would be, it's called like a hawk system. So that's actually will turn red. So the pedestrians will hit that, it'll turn red, it will stop traffic for the pedestrians. There's one on 125 in Epping, just a little bit north of 101. They've got a system like that for a rail trail that goes through there, but that'll be the car has to stop. It's a red light, it's required that they stop.
Great, thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, well, I'm sure we'll hear more that we should have asked during public comment, but thank you, David and Hans, for being here this evening. I'd ask that you stay and listen to public comment, and then there'll be, I will go through and start that if there are no other questions of the council. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So now on to public comment. First up, and again, if you would like to speak on this and you didn't sign up on this form, just raise your hand when I get through the names, and we'll bring you up. Paige Trace on Portsmouth.
Good evening, Mayor Becker. No, not. Mayor McEachran, members of the City Council. I'm here tonight to speak to the tiered impact fees proposed on behalf of the Rec Committee for our local nonprofits and youth sports groups that are currently excluded from those tiered rec fees, such as Little League. Those fees are wrong. First of all, the parents and supporters are volunteers who set up the games and clean up afterwards. Impact fees are proposed when in fact the care and the maintenance of the fields is already provided for in the Department of Public Works budget that those parents pay for with their taxes already. It's line item 03921 under DPW, Parks and Cemetery Programs. The 2025 budget was $60,000. It can be found on page 332. We all know that any fee, impact or otherwise, has to go before the City Fee Committee before it's brought before the City Council to be approved. Yet the fee schedule currently in practice for the Recreation Committee department specifically states, quote, asterisk, does not include local nonprofits and youth sports leagues. The first step should be taking this before the fee committee. Has this abrupt departure from non-current practice been voted on and approved by the fee committee? I'll assume it hasn't. Let's recap. You wish to apply impact fees on nonprofits for youth sports that will trickle down to those who can barely afford to live here and provide for their families, when actually those proposed impact fees are already paid for by taxpayers under care and maintenance in the DPW budget. So, the taxpayers already get to pay for it. I'm confused. Wouldn't that be double dipping? Finally, you're willing to impose impact fees on nonprofits promoting sports health and charge young families to death for recreation for their children. When it comes to impact fees on large development projects, potentially impacting our city services and placing stress on our natural resources, not possible. So our first impact fees are to be on nonprofits due to the actions, the impacts of our children. There are no words for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. Next is Petra Huda on fees process.
Good evening, Preacher Huda, 280 South Street. I'm here to talk to you about number 15B for the Rec Department impact fees for nonprofits. I think Paige covered most of it, but I will expound a little bit on it. This is not the process for this. The process is outlined in your budget book. The other thing that is a little I guess disturbing about this is that on page of the fee schedule, page 111.37, it does exclude local nonprofits such as youth leagues and from electrical lighting. What was noted in your Y impact fees was also a little out of process. The assignment of impact fees will be determined by the rec staff. Impact fees collected from these organizations will be managed and held in the rec department, and then these funds would be used to maintain, upgrade facilities related to equipment and other costs for the fields. So, as an accountant, this is assigning the fee, collecting the money, and then spending it with no other internal controls. That doesn't really hold water, for one thing. The last thing on this is that two departments, the school department has money in the budget for this, and so does Public Works. So I would ask why this is coming forward now after the budget process is done and the revenue has been collected, and why would this go totally directly away from our standard process for this? I urge you to vote this down. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Next up is Tyler Garzo on New Hampshire DOT. Route 1. And I realized I sent you an email wondering where this is, but
I tried. Anyway, Tyler Garzo, 62 McKinley. I live about 2 houses away from Route 1, and I bike on the corridor about 5 times a week. I wanted to address a couple things. First, widening the road. Yeah, they are widening the road. The first public information meeting said 11-foot lanes and 2-foot shoulders. Now they're 5-foot shoulders in this setup. 5-foot shoulders will increase the speed of the road by an average of 5 to 6 miles per hour. Also, the space between the two roundabouts, it's already 2 lanes southbound, 1 lane northbound. They're not really making a change for the better or for worse here. But generally speaking, the aim of this project is to prioritize moving large vehicles as quickly as possible while ignoring critical externalities like environmental and community impact. It's the outdated auto industrial complex at work. We're being presented with sneaky plans to expand roadways and shoulders, add about 3,000 feet of car lanes, and spend millions of dollars on roundabouts, all justified by engineering manuals that have already been dismissed by progressive cities. This isn't progress, and it isn't better than doing nothing. This project disregards community recommendations that align with Portsmouth's 2024 Climate Action Plan and the 2017 Complete Streets Guide. It's totally non-compliant with the Complete Streets Guide. Instead of adopting reduced speed limits, narrow shoulders, and single lanes north and southbound, which would actually control the speeds and number of cars using the road, this plan entrenches unsustainable habits and relies on the engineering favorite of enforcement rather than actually pursuing good design. Transportation accounts for 60% of our community's greenhouse gas emissions, according to the Climate Action Plan. And this expansion will only induce more driving. Offering a bike path as a trade-off for widening the road is not a solution. It's a Band-Aid on a broken system. Councilors, we must resist this unfunded state-level effort to maintain the status quo of fast polluting vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. Next up, Esther Kennedy on Portsmouth.
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. And Mayor, I also want to remind you this week is Teacher Appreciation Week. And they've done a lot of great things out there. It's a tough time. And I want to commend all the teachers in our city and thank them for doing their job. Tonight I come forward because there's a lot of zoning going on here, folks. A lot of changes. Tyler just brought some great points. And we don't have a master plan. So my question is, why are we doing all this zoning and doing everything to make all these changes? Rec, zoning, water treatment, stormwater runoff. Tonight we saw on it electric chargers. Where's the master plan? This is all just popping in, changing, and there's no master plan that is being solidified at this point. And, you know, I kind of cracked up back there when I heard Councilor Dutton and Councilor Cook talk about widening the road versus not widening the road. Well, if you're going to have that much building take place on a corridor, in order to move people, you're going to have to widen the road. I don't agree with it, but it's reality. And yet we're building everywhere and no one has thought about the master plan. If you want smaller highways, if you want roads that aren't widened, then give a master plan. Talk about it. Or do we not want to talk about it? That would be my question to you all. Do you not want to deal with a master plan and we just want to get things through for our friends and family? I don't know. I ask you to answer it. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Next up is Arthur Clow on an analysis.
Good evening. Arthur Clow, 431 Pleasant Street here in Portsmouth. Hi, neighbors. I came in here to get my car renewed and the registration, and great service as always. But I noticed a little poster that said, opening later on Wednesdays. And I also thought about the number of employees that have been growing here over the years, and I did a little analysis. I looked at Dover, took their hours, added them up for public access, 43 and a half hours a week of customer service. Then our little town of Rye, 42 and a half. And then I looked at Portsmouth current hours, disregarding that Wednesday deal, 40 and a half hours. Now, how could this be? How could our metropolis have so few hours? So I started looking at contracts. Well, we're set up for employees working 37 and a half hours as opposed to many other communities, 40 hours. So if you see somebody in a position making $40,000 in Dover and you see them making $40,000 in Portsmouth, the people in Portsmouth often work 2.5 hours less a week. But it gets worse. With 40.5 hours that we're open, if they take their 1 hour lunch break just Monday through Friday, we are down to 36.5 hours. 36.5 hours that they're working. But also on Friday, if you come in, we close at 1. Cars are largely gone a little after noon. That gets us down to 35.5 hours to other towns' 40 hours of work. Why is this? Why is it that we need so many people in Portsmouth? Well, for every 16 people working, you'd have enough to get a 40-hour worker. So for every 16, we have hundreds. Because of the 1 hour lunches and the shortened hours, for every 11.5 people, we could get another 40-hour person for the same amount of money. And because they leave early on Fridays, we're down to about 9. So my question is, are we still paying people 37.5 hours of time when they can't even work those hours in a week? It's time for you guys to do your job and go through and analyze why we need so many people in the city of Portsmouth.
Thank you, Arthur. Next up is Kathy Hersey on no topic given.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Hersey. I live on Lafayette Road, the Elwyn Park section. I'm here to talk about the new section of improvements. I don't seem to like change too much, but the state has worked with the residents of Lafayette Road to really listen to us, our issues, and as long as they don't take any property away from the residents of Lafayette Road, I'm okay with that. I'm not okay with the roundabouts, only because it will be a steady stream, and for me to turn left, there are times now I have to wait 5 to 7 minutes to get out of the driveway to turn left, heading south. So I'm not a roundabout fan. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Next is Rick Muse on Route 1. Oh, okay. Now Matt Glenn, Route 1, and then we'll come back.
Good evening. Matt Glenn, 34 Harrison Ave, and president of Seacoast Area Bicycle Riders. And I want to start by just making sure you're all invited to the Mayor's Ride we're hosting on May 18th in partnership with the city. It's called the Mayor's Ride, but you're all most welcome. And even if you don't ride a bike, you can come to the middle school at 2 o'clock and you can say something to the crowd if you'd like to do that. But it's a great celebration. It's only a 6-mile ride, and we'd love to see you. So Lafayette Road, I've been on the Public Advisory Committee for this project for 5 years. I know it's been running the planning even longer than that. It's been a really long time coming. I want to thank Dave Smith and Dave McNamara for all the listening they've done, all the willingness to have conversations with the abutters and with the public, hearing a lot of different recommendations from different people. They've synthesized that. I think they've made the plan better. I also want to thank the residents who joined the PAC, and we had 2 more meetings since last November where they were able to make their voices heard. It was probably not your typical public advisory committee to have basically everyone who lives on that corridor directly abutting in that section to be invited onto the committee, but it was really great to have them there, and I feel that the project is better because of it. SABRE recommends this plan. Your existing master plan does have recommendations for Route 1, including multi-use paths, and your bicycle and pedestrian plan and new plan coming also recommend this. So I thank you for supporting it. On the topic of roundabouts, I did initially have concerns about what pedestrian crossings would be like, what bicycle crossings would be like. I had the chance to experience a downtown in a city about our size in New York State that had a roundabout right there as a pedestrian. It functioned very well. I think in front of Walmart, having 6 lanes now and seeing that going down to 2 lanes to cross to an island and then a single lane to cross with a flashing light, I think that's a real improvement. So I encourage you to support this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Any other Portsmouth residents like to speak, and then we'll go back to you, Elizabeth. Feel free.
My name is Marcia Hyland. I live right on Lafayette Road. I did want to also express my appreciation for both of the Daves from DOT and Santec. Truly great professionalism. They listened to us. They worked with us. I absolutely agree with the suggestion by Mayor McEachern and Councilor Cook about if we can push, they've done a great job as far as moving the road 6 feet to the west. If we can move it any further, it's still going to help all of us, especially if we could put trees along there. They took out those trees years ago. But to put those trees also gives us safety. It does make it more recognizable as a neighborhood area, because right now you've got so much traffic coming in there. If you've got to cut off, you're going to be in our front yard. But trees would certainly soften that. So if we can move that any further, that would be phenomenal. My only concern about this is that there's still this issue about the right-of-way determination, that they don't know exactly where the right-of-way exists. And that's going to come down further along in the project. My only concern, again, is that if the right-of-ways come back to where it's not where they think it is now, we're going to start this all over again as far as us fighting this. None of us want to lose any land. We can't afford to lose any land because of our access, and also just we don't have that much frontage anyway. And we would have to go back to that letter that was signed by Cal Canny, the former city manager, that was sent to all the residents on Lafayette Road years ago, that they would never take any of our land. It would have to go on the western part. So I'm hoping we're still going to honor that. Hope this project goes back and goes through as well as it does. And if we can make any more improvements, as you suggested, that would be phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. Next, last and never least, Elizabeth Bratter on NEIOD.
Just give them all to me and I can pass them.
Oh, goodness.
No, we're good.
Good evening, Elizabeth Bratter, property owner, 159 McDonough Street. I do want to ask if I can talk about Route 1 when I'm done doing this. Can I get out of line and come back, or no?
Well, it's not a public hearing, so no, but
No, okay.
3 minutes.
All right. So I just provided you with 2 things. One is the Northeast Incentive Overlay District, which is a little bit complicated if you've never seen it before, but I'm giving it to you for reference. I highlighted that it's the north end, what they get, what they have to do. There are little footnotes, as we used to call them, of little numbers that you have to pay attention to. I highlighted them, printed on the next page. I also included a comparison of uses for CD5 and CD4, which are identical, and then CD4W. These are just comparisons for you to have for review. I highlighted in red the difference between CD4 and CD4 and 5, and in green is also the other things that are different. Obviously, you can tell that CD4 and CD5 are more intense. The only thing I have to say about Route 1, and those were strictly is about Route 1, is I would like to invite you to come to Route 4 and head north on Route 4 or south, and then If you head south on Route 4 at the new circle that they put in there 2 years ago, and then try to get to Spur at 3:30 in the afternoon, the way you do that is you get to the middle of the circle and then you lay on your horn while people try to figure out why they're supposed to stop coming into a circle, because they think if they're on Route 4, they don't have to slow down, because the angle they come in at is very, very straight on, and it allows them to go through. The other thing is to try to go from Spur Road in the morning to Route 16, and in order to do that, you have to cross Route 4 where they are going southbound. And again, once you get to the middle, you can't get in there because the traffic going doesn't stop. So I would caution you to try that. I would dare you, please make sure your life insurance is up, to try to cross Route 4 using the light with the island. I've done it a few times. I usually pray before I go. What happens is if the cars don't stop for you, when you get to the middle, you no longer have a light to get the rest of the way. So you push the button, you cross. First of all, nobody stops because they're confused because there's a light after a circle, which doesn't make any sense but to a few people who've seen this. Then somebody figures it out, they stop for you, you get to the middle. In the meantime, the timing on the light has gone by, you get stuck in the middle, and the only way to get across is to have somebody push the button. So I would invite you to come down to that circle, try it out from all different directions, and really get a sense for that before you put those circles in on Route 4, because the people will not be able to get across safely, and people come from the side will not, and people will not be able to get out of their driveways. There'll be no pacing anymore. It'll be the Indianapolis Speedway like it is on Route 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. No other hands, no hands on Zoom, no other speakers, public comment here. Thank you again. So as Marcia referred to them as the Daves, and Hans, who stepped in as one of the Daves tonight, appreciate that. We're going to go on to the, do we need any, this is just a presentation, there's no action on this at this moment.
Correct.
So public hearing and second reading of ordinances. Public hearing and second reading of ordinance amended Chapter 10 zoning ordinance, Article 4 zoning districts and regulations by adding co-living as a new use. Article 8 supplemental use standards be amended by adding Section 10.815 co-living, and Article 15 definitions. Wait for the presentation. We have, and it's coming up. Peter, all right.
Welcome, Peter.
Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. This presentation is on the second reading of the co-living amendments. Go to the next slide. The Planning Board has been working on these amendments for the past year, and then at their March 20th meeting, they came to a draft that they felt was good to forward to the City Council, which they did. And then the City Council had their first reading on April 7th and made some changes, which they expanded where they would allow this use, and deleted a definition that was proposed to change. That definition was family, the definition of family. If you'll go to the next slide. The co-living use is a new type of housing that would be communal or dormitory style, which will diversify the housing opportunities in the city. As proposed, it's allowed by conditional use permit in character districts 4, 5, CD4W, Gateway 1 and 2, and Business District. The use is not allowed for short-term rental, so it must be rented for more than 30 days. And it consists of co-living units and co-living facilities. The co-living unit you can think of as the bedroom or the sleeping area. It's limited to 2 people maximum. And if it's for one person, it has to be at least 100 square feet. And if it's a double occupancy, it has to be at least 120 square feet. And these units may or may not contain a bathroom, but they cannot contain kitchen facilities. Next slide. So the co-living units will be in a co-living facility which is a portion of a building that contains both co-living units and co-living common areas, which are the shared kitchen and living spaces to provide for the people in the co-living units. And as proposed, co-living facilities shall not exceed 80 residents in a building or 40 residents per floor. Next slide. In each facility that has 40 residences shall have an on-site full-time manager for every 40 units. So if you had 80 units, you would have to have 2 residence managers on site. Co-living facilities can be owned, but the individual units cannot be owned individually. So an owner can own a co-living facility, and they would own all the co-living units that then could be rented. The co-living common areas shall be at least 1,200 square feet, and then they increase by 20 square feet per co-living unit. Next slide. As far as the parking requirement as proposed, if a co-living facility is within 600 feet of a public parking garage, no parking is required. And then if it's greater than 600 feet, you have to have 1 space per every co-living unit. And the next slide shows a map of the 2 circles represent 600 feet from the existing parking garages, the Foundry and the Hanover. And then where it's proposed in CD5 and CD4, so if you're within these circles, you would not have to require parking for this use. And then if you're outside of that, you would have to meet that parking requirement of 1 space per every 4 co-living units. There is a permitting process outlined in the draft ordinance that will go through once they get the conditional use permit, then it has to go through the city clerk's office for permitting. Signage must be, permanent signage must be displayed at the co-living facility that identifies the management facility or manager. And this has to be updated if it changes and has to be provided to the city clerk's office so that we have a current record of who is managing the property and their contact information. Co-living facilities shall be inspected in accordance with our local fire and housing codes and the inspection schedules that there are outlined for fire and inspections. And they will occur on their schedules as they have outlined in their codes. Also, with co-living facility conditional use permit, there is opportunity for modifications of these standards as it goes through the process with the planning board. The next slide shows the definitions that are be added to the ordinance. The definition of boarding house is proposed to be revised to include provisions for required contact information for a management facility for a boarding house, which is currently not there. And then definitions are proposed to be added for co-living common area, co-living facility, and co-living unit. And then the way that the square footage is measured is similar to that of an accessory dwelling unit, which is the gross living area, which is the interior space, as opposed to gross floor area, which is exterior walls. And then with this ordinance, the proposed definition of family will be deleted. And that sums up this ordinance. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Peter. Any questions for Peter at this time? Seeing none, we will listen to the public hearing. Now opening the public hearing. Speak to, for, or against.
Peter Huda, 280 South Street. So I guess I have some questions moving forward on this and some ponderings that the City Council needs to make on this. First, number 10/8/15/22, co-living shall be no more than 2 persons. So who's going to enforce this if you don't have a manager on site? This would be like a hostel or a dorm. Next, something that is really totally unacceptable and would create an issue on the same subject. Co-living facilities shall include at least a full-time manager at all times. I urge you to delete every 40 residents, as suggested by one of the planning board members who actually works in the business for this. If you do not have a resident manager on site at all times, things are going to get out of control. Next, co-living facilities shall not exceed 80 residents. Really? This is more than is usually in dorms. So these people are not going to know each other, are just going to come here and stay, and everything's just going to be quiet and cool, and they're not going to increase our need for services there at all. Next, parking requirements. So on this is being touted as workforce housing. So let's do a reality check on parking here. First of all, this is obviously spot zoning for one developer who pulled his request previously. And I'm sure after this goes through, he'll be back. Next, do you actually believe that somebody who can't afford to have an apartment will actually, or two people that can't afford to rent something, are going to pay to park in the parking garage that is only 600 feet or 2 minutes away? Or do you think they're going to displace other people who are going to like to use our restaurants and our retail? I would suggest that that's what's going to happen. If these people can't afford to rent anything else for a longer period of time, they're going to be displacing parking downtown, which hurts our retail and hurts our restaurants. The last thing on the parking is number 101531 2. Off-street parking is required at the rate of one space for 4 co-living units. So one space could be 8 people. So I do not believe this is realistic. If I take the example that Councillor Bagley mentioned a couple weeks ago when this was under discussion about a nurse coming here and using these facilities. Great. So the question would be, where are the hospitals located here? Where are the rest of the services located here? These people are going to have cars, and putting one space for 8 people is not realistic. The last question I would have on this is, it seems that we have all the inspection on here except health. If there's going to be a co-living kitchen here with various sizes for the common area, somebody's going to have to bring food in. Somebody's going to have to worry about these meet our health codes. This is going to cost the city and the residents more money. I urge you to put the health inspector in here also. And the last thing would be on, if I understand what's going on here, especially with the permits, I would urge you not to put any more burden on our city clerk to have all of these requirements met before they go to her to issue this permit, if this goes through like this. I think there's the last thing that I think the council needs to answer on this question is, does Portsmouth need to decide if they want to be a bedroom community, or do you want us to have a vibrant downtown and be a rental and retail destination? This goes through, you're going to have people parking downtown, and they're going to be extended, and they're going to displace our restaurant and all our other facilities, especially in the winter. And the thing that just kills me about this is the whole thing about having bicycles and not needing a car. We live in New England. they're not going to be able to take their bicycle and go to work at a hospital that is 2 miles away, or go get groceries. Are they going to bring them back on their bicycle, or are they going to walk in the middle of a snowstorm? I don't think so. Think about it, people. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Any other speakers?
Elizabeth Bratter, property owner, 159 McDonough Street. If any of you have traveled anywhere, you're fully aware that if you go to a youth hostel or if you stay in a boarding house, there is somebody there. Even the cheapest youth hostels that years ago were $3 or $4 a night, there was somebody there when you got there. And that was for smaller youth hospitals, and bigger ones had quite a few people. I do have concerns about this being unsupervised, having lived next to the 2 rooming houses in Portsmouth when they were wild and exciting. I will tell you that the one that's up the street from us on Cabot Street is much more tame now, and that's because the owner of the property is there a lot more often and is supervising the place. So I think if you've ever lived in a dorm where there's more than 40 or 50 people, there is a sort of thing that happens, and that's more people come in to keep each other company. We can all eat together. There is a lot of stuff. So I do have grave concerns about these larger units being unsupervised. As someone who rents lots of units, I am fully aware what happens when maybe 2 or 4 people get together and then they invite all their friends. So that's one thing to keep in mind, especially if you're gearing these towards younger people. I am a little leery, but I think I can swallow it, and that's the 30 days. Usually nurses come for more than 30 days. I think they come for 60 to 90 days. I'm not a nurse, I can't attest to that. But I do have concerns about the 30 days because it just seems like a very short period of time. I worry about people needing temporary housing, and maybe that's what these things could come into at certain times of year. It's just something to keep in mind about the 30 days and the consequences. I want to be sure they don't turn into Airbnb and force out other people who have hotels in that area, as well as other rentals. And the parking is of concern. Again, you're talking about one space for up to 8 people. That seems really, really low. As someone who lived in the neighborhood of Islington Creek for a long time, I can tell you even to this day, there's a major parking problem. Other people who live in the South End can tell you that we have the free parking that's within walking distance of those 2 parking garages. And since the parking garage has gone in, there has been an increase in parking in the neighborhood of Islington Creek because now they see the free parking. It has helped that the parking division has lowered it for employees who work downtown. They have a special deal there, and that really helped. But it is a concern that the parking is just too little for what you're going to have. If you work anywhere in town other than right in the middle of town, you are going to need a vehicle to get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. I was sitting in your seat when Brewster was having its problems. We had people from all over coming and talking to us. We had health officials coming and talking to us about what was happening. We had police officers talking to us about what was happening to the Brewster apartments. I ask you again, do a master plan. Why are we plopping this in the middle of our city with 80 car potential? We know both parking garages are going to be full because someone tried to get in there recently and we're told there was a waiting list. Why are you not creating a master plan to make sure that we can take care of the working people? Everything you've built so far, someone making $20 an hour cannot habitate. We know that. But your parking, the Economic Commission talked about all the closed storefronts, our last meeting. And what are you jeopardizing by putting 80 more people who we know will have potentially some kind of vehicle. We know, because you haven't done the master plan, our transportation system is almost non-existent. We know we live in New England during harsh winters, harsh ice storms, cold. People are going to have transportation. You don't have a supermarket downtown. In the old days, at least you had the A&P down there. You have nothing because no one has talked about the master plan and how you're going to get a supermarket downtown. At one point, it looked like a Whole Foods might go in, but that fell apart. You have not made accommodations for this one situation. And yes, it is spot zoning. Mr. McNabb is creating a spot zoning environment. You are creating it for him. Only one person is going to benefit from this. I don't think you've thought it all through. I don't think you've thought it through for the burden of our restaurants and our local businesses downtown. I don't think you've thought it through for the people staying there, who, as was pointed out earlier, how are they going to afford the parking garage? It's expensive. It is up to the person developing this property to make sure the development enhances our city, not take it down. And right now, I really believe there's a lot of questions unanswered. And I believe that you folks should be creating a master plan and talking about this. What does it look like? How is it going to work? Are there other places in the city that you might be able to get developments like this? But I caution you, and I know you weren't here for Brewster Street. Most of you didn't even live in the city at that point. I caution you, what happened at Brewster Street was not pretty. It was very difficult as a counselor to sit up there and hear the horrors that were going on and what the community residents in the neighborhood had to deal with. So I really think that you should take a moment, think it through, put it in front of a committee, put it in front of the Economic Commission, and say, do we want 80 people downtown that have no parking and really no facilities besides a bathroom and a communal kitchen? Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Any other speakers? 2 for or against? Coming up, Tyler.
I wasn't going to speak on this, but it sounded really interesting once parking got started. I bike to the grocery store year round. I bike to the Pick and Pay as a college kid. We have a bus system, and we can invest more money in it. We're focusing on a small portion of the population that has potential not to own a car. So there's just a couple of conclusions. Most important, which is parking is priced way too low and should probably be put under the purview of our parking director with a 85% occupancy target rather than the city commission. Second, the RPP residential parking program, probably a good idea. Thank you.
Hey, Tyler. Any other speakers? 2 for or against?
Mayor McEachran, ladies and gentlemen, Paige Trace, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. You know, I sat back there when I first started hearing about this, and I started to giggle because I thought, dorm again in Portsmouth. Dorm life, it's what I remembered from 1,000 years ago, being in a big, huge dorm with 40 other people, and you could come down to the living room, and it was the common area. And if you weren't in the living room, you went into the kitchen and you were fed. But that's not what Portsmouth is about. Then I started to hear this more serious side of this whole thing, which does include a lack of a master plan that we should have. And I come back to the parking, like everybody else. 1 in 8. Where do the other 7 go that have cars? Because I'm going to guess that maybe it's not the other 7, maybe it's the other 6, maybe it's the other 5. But we all know that those circles that you've drawn more than likely hit some private residential areas where the parking's free. Maybe Parrott Avenue, part of it. And if the circles don't hit it, the people are still going to find those free areas. Having once lived in one, I know what it's like. Residential parking has come. The time is now, and it's the only way that you might give those taxpayers who already pay a staggering amount of tax to at least have the potential to park in this city. And dear God, look at a master plan. Look at the possibility. Because you're going to place a dorm, a college dorm, in the middle of Portsmouth. And why? Think of all the people that honestly purchased their condos in a very expensive city, I reckon. And we do need housing. But those people who already paid for those really expensive condos, who are already having difficulty finding parking, and those restaurateurs and those shops that depend on those parking spaces that already exist and don't need any more pressure consistently from people who live there now but don't have any place to park. Come on, it's a pressure cooker. So, no, I don't find dorm life in this instance very funny because it could do too much damage to the city of Portsmouth. And I think you guys are going to try and honestly do something about this. But voting for spot zoning for one small area and to add to it all the pain and suffering that you will eventually give to current residents is wrong. And I ask you nicely, kindly, respectfully to take a good hard look at this. There's no harm in that. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Paige. Any other speakers? Seeing none rise, none on Zoom, closing the public hearing. Any further council questions or deliberations? Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now over almost 2 years ago, not quite 2 years ago, but almost, before the last election, there were several of us, including me, calling for consideration of co-living downtown and in other districts in the city. And the reason is that we have a severe housing crisis in Portsmouth. We have a lot of residents and we have a lot of workers who have nowhere to go. The rents keep going up. They're looking for alternatives. And I personally lived in co-living in my 20s. So I have personal experiences with this type of housing in units that were a little bit smaller than 40. But it was a way for me to be able to afford to live and work in the places where I had a job. And it allowed me to walk to work in places where I didn't own a car because I could live near my workplace. And so that's really the goal of co-living, is to provide housing for individuals who work in the city and need a place to live and don't want to have to commute from Rochester or Somersworth. And even Rochester and Somersworth are becoming less and less affordable for individuals who work in Portsmouth. So I think that this is a great step in the right direction. I also would endorse a neighborhood parking program, a resident parking program for the city of Portsmouth. I think we need to move in that direction. We need to be talking more comprehensively about parking, and there have been indications. Several members of the council have been talking about that, including the mayor, bringing up concerns around how we move forward with changing the way we look at parking in the long term. But delaying a change in our zoning because we don't have a perfect solution for parking only hurts people who need places to live. And so I will support this every day. I'm excited that we're moving forward with our master planning process now, and this provides guidance with that. Thank you to Councilor Moreau who's going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting with the planning board on the master planning process, and is also working with the Rockingham Planning Commission on a planning process, which he talked about at the last meeting. I think that there's a lot of planning going on, and providing guidance for those planning processes around zoning helps those processes move forward more smoothly. So I'm supporting this, and I hope my fellow councilors will as well.
Councilor Blaylock, then Councilor Bagley, and Councilor Morrell.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm excited to see this come before us. I know when we were on the Land Use Committee, we talked about different types of housing, diverse housing. When you want a house to have every single amenity, it's going to be more expensive. It's going to be less affordable. When you require them not to have every single amenity, it becomes more affordable. So if you don't require a parking space, or you don't require 4 parking spaces, if you want to require them having a pool, it'd be really expensive. But that's not what we're trying to do. That's not one of our goals up here. We're trying to offer more affordable housing options for people that live in Portsmouth, and people that work in Portsmouth, and people that want to live in Portsmouth. My family owns a restaurant in downtown Portsmouth. We're just celebrating our 51st year as a business, as a restaurant in Portsmouth. My father used to live on Ceres Street, right across, and you could, walk over. Unfortunately, the rent in town has changed. Most of my staff does not live in town anymore. But I would love to provide more chances for them to. I can tell you a lot of my staff that even doesn't live in town rides their bike to work from Dover. Some skateboard to work. But I think providing options, I think basing zoning on past experiences, I was in Portsmouth when Brewster Street was happening. Me and the mayor used to ride our bikes over to go see if the police were there and anything was going on when we were preteens. But times have changed. I think it's all how you manage it. I think having an on-site manager for every 40 residents could help solve any of those worries or those issues. But I think this is a good idea for more affordable housing and some diverse solutions.
Councilor Blaylock, Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just a couple comments. I'll be supporting this. We do have a master plan. It's true that we're creating a new master plan, but it's not like we're operating without one. So that this talk that we don't have a master plan is not correct. The second thing is this talk about parking and, what are we going to do, for the people that bought expensive apartments with parking, or for the stores, or for the retail, what are they going to do if there's no parking? And people don't come to Portsmouth because of parking. They don't live in downtown Portsmouth or want to live in downtown Portsmouth because of the parking. They want to be in downtown Portsmouth because of the walkability, because of the community, because of the human scale of our downtown. And they're willing to put up with difficulties in parking so they can do those things. So by letting the market decide, if you have a condo or residence downtown with secured off-street parking, you're going to pay a huge premium, far more than $100 a month, which is the going rate, albeit there is a waiting list at the Foundry Garage for residents of Portsmouth to have a parking pass. And I know this because I have one. So for $100 a month, which is $1,200 a year, you could be a nurse who has an apartment downtown with parking 600 feet from your location. And looking at the cost of rentals today, that would be far cheaper than renting a condo or apartment downtown that has reserved off-street parking. So these are innovative ways to address the housing crisis that we have. Is it for everybody? No, but none of our housing solutions are for everybody. There's different types of housing for different types of people at different points in their lives. Sometimes you're living with a big family. Sometimes it's a multi-generational family. Sometimes it's just you out on your own. You know, maybe you grew up in a different part of the country and you're living in Portsmouth and you don't have that support structure. Well, co-living is the perfect, probably, solution for you. But if you grew up in Portsmouth and you have 5 generations that lived here and your parents and your grandparents have a home, maybe you stay at that home for a little bit longer and you save up money until you can afford to buy. We all have different economic situations that we're in, and they all require different solutions. And that's what this is. It's just a different solution than what's been proposed before. And I think it's an innovative approach to a crisis that we have, and I'm going to be happy to support it.
Okay, Councilor Bagley. Councilor Moreau.
I do have a question and some comments I'd like to make, but I'm going to start with making the motion to move to pass second reading, hold third and final reading at the May 19th, 2025 City Council meeting.
Second.
There was brought up, so I'd like to ask our city attorney, it was brought up that this might be spot zoning, and I would just like to make sure we put out there that in my analysis, it's not spot zoning, but I just want to confirm that with our city attorney.
I know that issue has been raised previously, and we do not believe it is spot zoning, but I will take the opportunity to speak up. You had previously changed this from the downtown to include other districts, and that's reflected in the use table in the proposed ordinance. However, in the narrative of your ordinance, you need to have a minor amendment. So it's not just allowed in the downtown under that first provision here.
Right.
In
Okay. Yep.
10.81510, if we deleted to be allowed in the downtown, which further supports the fact that it is not spot zoning.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't catch that, so thank you.
Would you like to make that motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion to strike to be allowed in the downtown under 10.815.10, purpose and eligibility.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, I'd like to further just make some comments. It was brought up about the Brewster Rooms. If there's anyone who put up with the Brewster Rooms, it was me, since I moved into that neighborhood in 2002 and lived with it through all of some really bad phases and through all of till where it got to today. There are 2 other boarding houses in our neighborhood, of which I learned as we were learning more about the Brewster Rooms. It was brought up early tonight. There's one on Cabot, there's one on Hanover, and honestly, our neighborhood's never had an issue with those. The issue with Brewster Rooms was ownership and management. We took a really hard look at this zoning at the planning board level. We've met on it several times and really discussed through all of the issues of management. And just because it takes 40 residents to have on-site management doesn't mean there isn't management. There's still going to be management. It has to be available 24/7. There has to be a number to call, and there's going to have to be a number with the city so that people can, or the city can, reach out to management. So I think that the management side of it has been carefully looked at and talked about, and I believe that we can create this innovative, as what all of my fellow councilors have said, and I agree with everything that's been said. I think we can create a management system through this that is not going to be a problem like we had at the Brewster Rooms. That was, and we've even added to the definition of boarding houses, which for those that are curious as to what the difference is, boarding houses are supposed to be under 10, so it doesn't quite meet the co-living definition. It would be, basically a home where there's people are renting out rooms. So I fully support this. I think it's a great innovative. We've gotten many emails from the public who are also supporting this. I see this as a great way for people who might have workers that come into town for 3 or 4 months, whether they be nurses or shipyard workers or whatever the case may be. This is a great thing. It's a great thing for seniors when, they might find themselves alone in a big house and they are more lonely but not really ready to move into retirement. This would be a great option for people like that. So it's the innovative way of actually trying to think of ways that we could actually have maybe even mixed genre of ages and different types of people. So I think it would actually enhance our downtown versus ever taking away for it. And I think it also helps the workers of downtown to give them another option as well. So I will get off my soapbox and let other people speak.
And Councilor Moreau, Councilor Denton, and then Councilor Tabor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I motion to amend section 815.21 from shall not be rented for less than 30 days continuous occupancy to shall not be rented for less than 6 months continuous occupancy. If there's a second, I'll gladly speak to it.
I'll second for discussion.
So, thank you. So 30 days is the statutory residential lease minimum in New Hampshire. Most states have a 6 to 12 month statutory residential lease minimum. The 30-day minimum largely favors landlords. This does this in two primary ways. The first way is it doesn't give renters any certainty once the 30 days is up. It'll go month to month. If it was a 6-month lease, they would generally have the option of another 6 months or possibly going month to month, but it will give far more certainty to renters who this is supposed to help. The second way that a 30-day minimum helps landlords far more than it helps renters are, the argument can be made, leases are negotiable. A renter could go to a landlord and say, please make this 6 months or a year, and they could agree. However, there's very little that a potential renter has to negotiate with in such a tight housing market for renters. So at the 30-day minimum, a potential renter could say, I'd like a year lease, and the landlord could say no, and just find the very next person waiting in line. I'm open to other lengths of time, but I definitely think 30 days, which is the statutory minimum in New Hampshire, is too short a time to give residents, which will be renters, any certainty that they'll be able to stay in that place for longer.
Discussion on the motion. Councilor Tabor?
I support the spirit of that motion. There are some advocacy groups for co-living that have some interesting facts. There's about 74,000 rooms of co-living around the country right now, and the average rental length is 7 months. I've also been concerned about renting for 1 month minimum because I think these successful co-living rentals carefully pick their tenants. And if you're turning over tenants every month, I think you're scrambling to fill rooms rather than carefully selecting tenants. My preference would be 3 months, though, and I would suggest that if you're amenable to that.
I'd rather wait to hear what the rest of the council says before I accept that.
And then overall, I really think we have to try this in Portsmouth. I think this is the alternative is that our downtown workforce drives 20, 30 miles out to towns to get low-priced housing. And that commute, the parking, all of that comes up to 50% of the income. That's not sustainable. It's not going to give us a workforce for the long term. There's thousands of jobs downtown within walking distance of a downtown co-living facility. And I think back to going door to door in Osprey Landing, and I talked to a woman there, single mother. She had a 20-something-year-old son, and she said, I don't know when he's going to be able to move out, as Councilor Bagler was saying. But I could envision this person who had a good job at a restaurant downtown, was a good worker, moving into co-living, walking to work, and that's a fantastic solution. I think we have to try this. And this is not the Brewster Arms apartments. Somebody's going to pay $900, $1,200, $1,300 a month. These are adults with adult jobs, adult relationships, and these are well managed. The renters are carefully vetted, and they have supervision and guidelines. So for all those reasons, I think it's a great thing and we should try it. And the planning board has put many hours of deliberation into this studied examples around the country. So I think we ought to do it.
And Councilor Tabor, back to Councilor Bagley and Councilor Morell.
Thanks,
And
Your
this
Honor.
is on the amendment, guys, so let's just focus on the amendment.
I would agree with Councilor Tabor. I think 3 months is a good compromise. There's a lot of work. You go work somewhere for a quarter, say at the shipyard or a hospital or a construction project. I think a month is a little bit short. I think 6 months is a little bit long. I think 3 months kind of finds a nice balance.
Councilor Morell.
I also could get behind doing a 90 days versus the 30 days, but I think of seasonal workers, and seasonal workers aren't always here for 6 months. So in thinking of that time when we need that extra help, you want to be able to give them rental units that they can have for that period of time too.
Councilor Lombardi.
Yeah, I would agree. I think a 90-day minimum is probably the best. I would also like to just address the when I was a younger person, I rode a bike all year round, and I commuted many miles on a bike year round through the winter in Boston. You can do it.
Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd be supportive of the 3 month. I think that aligns with, jobs at the shipyard, perhaps seasonal jobs at restaurants downtown, or possibly a traveling nurse or something. I appreciate Councilor Denton making us aware of the powers that would be given to a landlord over the tenant, and I don't want to give too much power either way, but I think the 3 months would be a good compromise.
I will, before you change that, I would not be supportive of any change from 30 days to 90 days to 6 months to a year. And the reason why is that this is exactly how things fail across the globe in trying to make any change. When we start to make a change to provide more housing, and then we want to put on other regulations to do other things. So we're trying to get more housing in there, and then we're also trying to get more tenant rights in there at the same time. Maybe it doesn't matter at 90 days, but I think that the focus of us putting more regulation when it comes to just trying to get more housing and something that's simple of 30 days and saying 30 days is there not for tenants or owners, it's so that you can't put it into a hotel. Can't become an Airbnb. And then as soon as we start trying to create this thing to be to think more of the things, and we have no idea how tenants are going to operate, maybe 90 days makes it, less profitable, or maybe it makes it worse because they got to wait, 2 more months to kick somebody out because they're a bozo. And they have a 90-day, agreement already, and they knew in 15 that they weren't going to renew this person past that. So I like the spirit of it, of trying to give tenant rights, but instead of the spirit and the kind of everything bagel that we would try to create with this, I would just try to create the housing. So I won't be supportive of any increase in this other than to keep this from becoming an Airbnb hotel. Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would echo that sentiment mostly because I think that we need to get this passed and get to third reading. And I think that this change might be substantial enough to push us to another second reading, which is my concern. I also have the other concern that I have a spouse who works in healthcare, and most locum tenens jobs in healthcare, short-term jobs, for physicians are 4 to 6 weeks, not 90 days. It's similar with traveling nurses, usually because they're trying to fill a slot between hiring. They've lost someone and it takes up to 4 to 6 weeks to get somebody else into a permanent position. Nowadays it sometimes takes more, so sometimes you end up with 2 or 3 shifts of traveling nurses. You frequently don't end up with the same person for a long period of time unless, and this is unfortunately the trend in healthcare now, they've left the position, they're still living locally, but they take the job as a temporary position because actually they pay more, unfortunately, now post-pandemic, and at this point it's really hard to hire long-term workers in healthcare because the short-term jobs do pay more. So I don't know that it helps solve that problem, and I think that is a problem locally. So I would be concerned about the shorter or the 3-month time frame, just when it refers to healthcare.
Councilor Lombardi and Councilor Bullock.
Mayor, I think you convinced me that we want to get this through, and I don't think there's anything keeping a facility from making a 3-month lease or making a longer lease if they want to. So it doesn't say they have to be 30 days, just it's a minimum.
All right. Well, Councilor Denton?
Your Honor, I'm going to accept the friendly amendment and amend my motion to read, shall not be rented for less than 3 months continuous occupancy. And just to speak to that further, as most people know, I am indeed a renter. I just re-signed a new lease, and the offer which I received was I could get the smallest increase if I signed a lease for 1 year. If I were to go to month, it would have been an even larger increase, or I could essentially leave the property when my current lease ends. So if we stuck with the 30 days, that should be what is expected. That after the 30-day window, the lease would essentially go month to month, and the tenants could either essentially pay more or leave the property versus having some more certainty. I think just 3 months opposed to 6 months gives that certainty. And yes, as Councilor Lombardi said, if it were left at 30 days, the landlord could agree to doing a longer lease. They could do a year lease if they wanted to, but there's very little incentive in actuality because the potential tenants don't have any leverage in that situation.
Need a second.
Is the second agree? Who is the second?
I agree, but I'll be voting against.
Councilor Moreau?
I just would like to confirm, because if this would hold up our third reading, would this be a substantial change?
I don't believe so. Not in adding just a couple of months to that one provision. I don't believe it's a substantial change.
Councilor Bullock?
I'm going to go back to the 30 days. I just think the more regulations we put on it, the less affordable. You know, we can guess what situation is going to occur. I understand Councilor Denton's example, but you know, say there was a restaurant that needed someone to work for a month and now they have to pay them for 3 months. I'm not going to keep guessing on what, but I think less regulation, the better.
All right, we'll do a roll call on this one, I guess, since I don't know how everybody's voting.
Okay. Councilor Tabor?
Yes.
Councilor Cook?
No.
Councilor Denton?
Yes.
Councilor Blaylock?
No.
Councilor Bagley?
No.
Councilor Moreau?
No.
Councilor Lombardi?
No.
Mayor McCaquin?
No.
Motion does not pass.
Any other comments, 2 for, against? I guess I'll say a few things on this as well. Pass the gavel to
Councilor Tabor?
Councilor Tabor. There was again, much has been said about our lack of a master plan. We have a master plan. The planning board is the body that does the work on the master plan, and they are hard at work designing that. And I think the idea of the master plan to somehow know all of the things about Portsmouth without trying anything before it gets to the master plan level is, somewhere between hubris and foolishness. Like, we don't know what we don't know already. So if we don't try something new in a place like downtown where there's a project that could happen, we don't know if it's going to work anywhere else. So we don't know, how to include it into other parts of the master plan. So this idea that we're going to somehow figure out the master plan and up here just on high know everything impossible. That's the planning board, and then they recommend it to us, and I look forward to the work that's going to get done on that. The second part, and I think it was Councilor Moreau, and maybe there was giggles in the back, but I don't think that they were warranted, is on seniors that might want to live here. There is a lot of loneliness out there. It might not be in this room for people that find community and civic action, but there is a lot of loneliness that exists. And, when I'm at if I go to, a big box store, if I'm at a Walmart or Home Depot, on Sundays because Richie's closed, but it's always, I wonder if of older folks that are well past the time to collect Social Security are there because they need the community and they don't have it, or that they need the money because they can't pay rent. But either way, this would solve for that, and so I think it's a good idea. And then the thing that caught some, I would say my attention when this first came up was parking. This is the reason why the micro units got killed next to Parrott Ave, because most people correctly pointed out that the parking would have just happened in Parrott Ave. I think that we do need a resident parking program. We're waiting for that to come back, where residents, and I don't see any reason why it couldn't be limited to the one per, the amount of parking that would be given required as a part of this would be the parking passes that would be delivered for on-street parking. I think that's the way that we solve it. We stop building housing for cars, and we start building housing for people. And so, when I think about the Portsmouth that had Brewster Street and Brewster, the whole, McDonough area was a lot different back then. Councilor Moreau moved in there and cleaned it all up. When I think of like the downtown especially, that's where the biggest changes have happened in Portsmouth, and we look at it as if it hasn't changed to the buildings. The HDC has kept the buildings looking, modestly the same, and some of the new buildings, fake the same. But what's really changed is the folks that are living in there. And after, the 10 o'clock area, the 11 o'clock, when you're walking around downtown, the folks that have bought those very nice condos, whether they're living there or not, don't spend as much time walking around the streets. I would love to see that sort of vitality back in the downtown from a residential standpoint. I think that if we create co-living, it's not a panacea, it's not going to fix everything, but I do think it gets to us to where I think we all want, and that's community. And that community downtown is that lifeblood of hopefully people that are working there, but people just, creating more of a feel, whether old, young, somewhere in the middle, being able to live there. And I think we're going to be able to solve for the rules around parking and resident parking that would come along with that. No reason to hold this up. Look forward to passing it. With that, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to suspend the rules?
So moved.
Pass third
Second.
reading?
Your Honor, I move to pass third and final reading.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Your Honor, we may not have voted on the
Suspend the rules.
suspension.
And
I
then
just want to make
vote.
sure we got it correct.
Yeah, I was voting
I
against
heard a
suspending the
second,
rules.
and then I
Oh,
didn't hear a
okay.
vote on
Vote to suspend we'll take the vote to suspend the rules again. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed.
The ayes have it. Vote to pass third reading.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Let's have somebody make that motion, just so we have it.
I'll make the motion again to pass third and final reading.
Thank you,
Second.
thank you.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-minute recess. Portion of the agenda.
Thank you, Your Honor. First up is a modest request to relocate a gas line, and this is part of the Chinburg development out on Shearwater Drive. So Lot 1, which is closest to the intersection with Market Street, has an existing natural gas line running through the parcel. So in order to develop it, Chinburg is at its own expense, working with Unitil to abandon the current line and relocate it to the existing right-of-way along Portsmouth Boulevard, all at its own cost. There is no cost to the city, and this has been approved by all city departments.
Your Honor, I'm going to recuse myself from this vote, seeing as Chinburg is my landlord.
Understood.
Okay, I move to grant the license to Unitil Gas for relocation of the existing natural gas line for Osprey Landing from the private parcel now owned by Chinburg Development LLC into the right-of-way for Portsmouth Boulevard.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Thank you. Item number 2 is a request of North Church for a second extension of its temporary construction license. It is in the process of wrapping up ADA accessibility and safety functionality improvements, and their second extension includes a much reduced area, down from 1,624 total square feet to a total of 625 square feet, I believe. I had that, yeah, the 650 square feet, there we go. So the request is for an extension through June 16th at that reduced rate. And I will remind the council that at previous meetings, you have voted to waive the fees associated with the project.
Mayor, I would move the city manager be authorized to execute and accept a second license extension to encumber the sidewalk area along 2 Congress Street that abuts the North Church as requested.
Second.
And as requested means, oh, sorry, Councilor Murrow?
I second it, but I would like to make an amendment that this is limited to June 13th, 2025, and that they be removed by that Friday versus the following Monday.
I'll second that.
And my reasons being is Market Square Day on the 14th.
And I see the proponents nodding.
Is there, okay, seems like that's reasonable, and even at the reduced square footage, I think
Yep.
Market Square Day could still go on, but we will.
I feel like if it's going to be gone by Monday, why can't it be gone by Friday?
All right.
They're not going to get any work done on Market Square Day, that's for sure.
Probably not a lot of drywall deliveries on that day. All right. So, and it's, and the fees are waived in this as well, or does that need to be amended? Do we need to amend that to?
I don't think so. We just were amending the days. So instead of 41 days, we do 38 days.
Right, but I'm saying it's an extension. We had previously waived the fees. Do we need to recognize as a nonprofit that we are going to waive these fees again? Why don't we just have an motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay.
Wait a minute,
So,
who made the motion?
Councilor Blaylock
Thank
made
you.
it with Councilor Bagley seconding that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Councilor Cook?
I just wanted to express my thanks to the North Church and the construction company that's working with them so diligently in reducing the size of the footprint of this construction area. I know that it can be challenging to do that, and I had raised the concerns initially. It really does make a difference downtown when there's just a little bit more space there, and I think people are already feeling that and really appreciating that effort. So thank you.
Agreed. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Do we have to vote twice for the 2 different motions?
2 amendments and then the motion.
Okay.
Did we vote for them?
Did we vote on the First Amendment?
No.
Oh, man, just getting so loose with those here.
Go down there.
Okay.
Gonna stop you.
So that was for the first,
That was for Councilor Moreau's
Okay.
amendment for
Yep.
June 13th.
okay, now for Councilor Blaylock's amendment to waive the fees. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Now, for the
Main motion.
main motion
as amended.
as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
opposed. All right, we got it.
Your Honor, I think item number 3 may involve a suspension of rules as brought up by a set of counselors. I'll defer to the council.
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we suspend the rules and bring forward 15C under my name regarding changing the zoning in the Hanover Hills Street area.
Second?
All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, sorry. I was still thinking about the last thing here.
Got to keep the mayor on target here.
Been a long week.
All right, so we've had lots of chit-chatting about this area for a long time, and the conversation started 5 years ago, just over 5 years ago at the planning board, and it did get, somehow that I've come to the realization, it never got pushed forward. There was this little thing called COVID, there was some staffing changes, just a lot of things happened, and once it finally was brought to my attention, the planning board then began to look at it last fall, end of summer, fall, and I really thought we were going to bring it forward and move it forward, and then a bunch of planning board members just decided we could kick the can down and look at it through the master planning process. And I was a little discouraged by that because I felt like in our work sessions we had made a lot of progress. Therefore, even though, and they outright said if we wanted to take it up, they didn't seem to have a problem with it. I just don't think that we can put off making this change that we have been talking about for 5 years. From going forward. I have brought forward what was the last sort of discussion at planning board as far as changes, not just to the CD4, but to the CD4W. And I think our lovely property expert in our neighborhood, Liz Bratter, has brought forward and given you lots of additional information on the comparisons of those two. I was actually not on board at first, but then when I really started to look at the differences, there aren't a huge amount of differences as far as really, it's dwelling units per lot. So I do understand that some of these lots will become non-conforming, but there's a lot of non-conforming lots in the city, so I don't feel like that's an unusual circumstance, but it might actually help to really look at the, truly what might get built if something gets redone. It might make it a little bit more of a gentle nudge as far as height and density goes, going on top of a neighborhood that is already dense with a lot of single-family neighborhoods or small unit developments, like 4 or less. So I would want to bring forward, and I do have a motion here, and I just have to actually find it. There we go. I'd like to move to schedule a first reading at the May 19th, 2025 City Council meeting for the proposed changes as I have put regarding zoning map, building height map, and aligning both the north end incentive overlay district and the downtown overlay district. And it's basically just because they don't match in that neighborhood. We're just trying to get both of them to be in the same area so that we don't have one covering some and one not.
Second. Any further discussion? Councillor Bagley.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. I reached out to Councillor Moreau because I thought she might be proposing something like this and saying that I would be willing to support it. Normally, I'm not in favor of more restrictive zoning. I think we have a housing crisis, and changing zoning is counterproductive to that. But this is a pretty unique situation where a neighborhood was made a lot of promises a number of years ago, and to reasons that are pretty much outside of everyone's control, including a global pandemic. Those promises weren't really able to be fulfilled. So I think we have a responsibility as a council to kind of stand up to the commitments that were made previously. And why I agree with the planning board's decision that the master plan might be a place where this could be approached. I think because of the history of this particular neighborhood, it behooves the council to move forward with Councilor Moreau's suggestions.
Councilor Bullock.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, I agree. I think this has had a lot of discussion over the years, and I'm happy to support this with Councilor Moreau and Councilor Bagley. I want to thank the planning board for all the work they've done on it, but at the same level, I'm not a big fan of kicking the can down the road, and I think if we can tackle this now, we should.
Thank you, Councilor Bullock. Councilor Cook, and then Councilor Tabor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just had a question for Councilor Moreau. Does this include the changes to the downtown overlay district as well that were proposed?
Correct. It's going to bring the downtown overlay district in line with the north end incentive overlay district. That has a lot of letters.
Let me follow up with that. Does this also include the changes on Sheaf and Court?
No, I did not include those because I thought those should be more part of a master planning conversation. I just included the pieces that were in this specific neighborhood.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Tabor.
Yeah, I'm going to support this motion for a couple reasons. One, I think this was brought to the city council by the neighborhood, and so it's back in our lap. And there were promises made to this neighborhood that the original way it was zoned was not correct, and it would be fixed. Second, just on the merits, I think this is a transition area. So to go from CD5, our most intensive use, to maybe 100 feet away to 3-story houses, compact houses that we see in the Islington Creek is just, I think they've got a just cause in that. And lastly, CD4W, the history of that was in the last master plan when it came to the West End. The initial rollout of zoning to support the master plan made everything as dense as the North End. Right, 5 stories right to the sidewalk. And the city manager at the time wanted a public dialogue about that, and the West End participated in a dialogue. And CD4W was designed to marry the density that was needed for the Chinburg apartments near Pick and Pay, or Hannaford's now, and the 3-story houses along Islington Street. So it's a transition zone, and I think it fits just right here.
Councilor Denton.
I plan to support this, but do have a question. Would this impact proposals that are currently before land use boards, or those grandfathered into?
Everything currently proposed has passed design review and had a public hearing. So if you're specifically talking about 361 Hanover, which is a part of, they're already locked into the current zoning.
And that's unless if they withdraw and resubmit.
Right, well, they've already withdrawn one and resubmitted another and had a second hearing on that one. So they've actually had 2 public hearings. And I think and the staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they have to submit an application within a year in order to keep that.
Yep, that's correct.
Yep.
But they are vested for the current zoning.
So as long as a full application comes to the planning board for site plan approval within a year from that date, they're good.
Any other questions? And just a technicality, I guess, Councilor Moreau, like the planning board, they had vested in the last meeting anyways, regardless of this change were to happen. So this wasn't because it wasn't taken up, didn't have any impact on that. I do agree. Well, I guess I kind of agree that, our zoning is always, it's very convoluted and there's a plan there. But as long as we have, zoning anywhere, we should have it, it makes sense and work out. And this seems like it was an oversight, and then COVID, and then an oversight still. And now to say that we're not going to do this until the master plan, which is probably, a good idea to have it in the master plan, sure. But we can still change it in the master plan with that dialogue in the future, but we should start from where we expected it to start from. And that's here. So for that reason, I'll support this. And, even though this is, it was not the recommendation of the planning board, I do trust the planning board to take it up in the master plan as they can, regardless if we change it or not. So with that, motion on the floor. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Abstentions? Nope. All right, so that took your report back instead, so we're back on to the consent agenda.
Your Honor, I move to adopt the consent agenda.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, appointments to be, presentations.
We have one more presentation.
Yeah, one more presentation.
And it's a brief one. I'm proud to bring up my colleague, Health Director Kim McNamara, and Susan Turner, who is the original founder of the Community Resource Network. They're going to just give you a brief overview of where your ARPA monies were spent to revive this wonderful resource. Kim's just bringing up the website.
There we go. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Councilors. During the pandemic, the COVID Recovery Task Force was formed to evaluate challenges and identify low-cost, high-impact recovery solutions that might be addressed with the city ARPA funds. One of the hardest-hit communities by the pandemic was our human service nonprofits, who did a heroic job during the pandemic, continuing to provide services to our most vulnerable citizens during that really impossible period. One of the most valuable resources identified by the task force, aside from the agencies themselves, was the Community Resource Network and its 100-page resource guide that lists 225 agencies. Many local agencies and city departments rely heavily on this document to find needed services for the people that are very vulnerable in our population and often fall through the cracks, becoming even more vulnerable. So the task force recognized that this vital document could be challenging to search through because it's an alphabetized list of agencies. So someone would have to know the name of the agency and what they do in order to be able to search readily. It was found that if it could be searched by need and location as well as by name, it would be more user-friendly and efficient. So this council voted to approve $20,000 in ARPA funds to achieve this goal. That is what we're here to briefly introduce you to tonight. And thank you for your support on this project. The Community Resource Network itself was the creation of Susan Turner, the enrollment counselor and community resource director, network director with Families First Health and Support Center. And Susan is going to demonstrate the new website for you. So I'd like to introduce the fabulous Susan Turner. And I would also like to introduce you to our health inspector, Connor Godin. Connor, stand up. Thank you. Connor helped with a lot of the legwork on reaching out to these 225 agencies in order to get updated contact information, because it's a monumental task that Susan usually does all by herself.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, and thank you all for your support in doing this. I appreciate it. Kim did have to bring me in kicking and screaming because that my baby that I gave you. I've been working on this 1990s, the late 1990s. A group of agencies got together. Rockingham Community Action used to be in this building, if you remember that. Seacoast Mental Health Center, Families First. Sea Care Health Services, which was a place that helped people who were uninsured get into doctor's offices. We brought together people for an Alliance for Community Health. And doing that, we looked to serve the most vulnerable people in our region, in our area, that all our agencies served. And that's how I started to work with that and say, we all need to know what everybody does. And not everybody knew in 1998, 96, we didn't have the Google thing, and we didn't have the internet thing. So, or we did have it, but not to the extent that it is now. And so I started putting together little blurbs, compilation of what the agencies did, how to get in touch with them, how people could talk to each other. And I put together agencies in a community resource networking meeting a couple of times a year so they could sit in circle and look at each other, the staff of these agencies, the worker bees, and say, this is what we do, this is the face of what you do, so if you want something, you can call me now, here's the phone number, and you know we've met. So we've done that. It started maybe 12, 20 people coming in circle. In March, I had 66 people in a circle representing 50 or more agencies in the region, which was wonderful. So that's what I did. And I've been doing that since the late 90s. And I've been doing it by hand. And I send out emails. When I first did it, I used to make flyers, and I folded them, and I stamped them, and I addressed them, and I brought them to the bulk mailing, and had that. Now I can just push a button, and I do email. So this is, and everybody wanted this to go this way. They didn't like my index. I was very proud that I could make an index. Okay, that was just as much technology I could do. So this is what you wanted. And we're going to, I can't see anything. And then we're going to go and do this, okay? So it's searchable. It's, the words they wanted me to use were searchable and filtered, making it easier to find the resources that people need. This is basically for the worker bees and agencies. It's not for the public at this point, because we were afraid that the agencies would become overwhelmed by requests and needs, and so people will be referring. If you work with Families First, if you work with CCARE, if you with Seacoast Mental Health Center, if you work with other agencies, all in this compilation on the screen, you would be able to get referred, and people will be able to find somewhere to send you to for what you need. So Darcy Creative did this wonderful thing, and they made it searchable by category. These are the categories we started with, and that we're asking people. This is a month up and out the door. This is a month that people have been doing this. So from the 200 and something agencies I had in that, I now have 66 who have joined, who have put their information in, which isn't too hard. I can do it. If I can do it, they can do it. And I have an email going out to the rest of them next week saying, hi, how about doing this? You want to come back in so people can find your resources. So we look at, what did you want to look at? We look at we talked about housing enough today. How about looking at senior services? Oh. See how much I do this well? So senior services, we want to search by category. I'm going to search for, oh, I'm supposed to put that in. Okay, wait. Senior services. And they're coming up. These are all the agencies that work with seniors, that provide resources for seniors, all the agencies so far. Does this work on this way? No, I have to do it this way. Where is it?
What are you looking for?
I'm going to look at the thing to make it go down.
Oh, yeah, this bar here.
Oh, that bar. Can I just do that? No.
Not on this computer.
Oh, shouldn't look at the screen. I should look at this screen.
There you go.
There it is. So these are some of the senior services that are in this. And you can go by and then you can search by location. There's locations within 5 miles of where we're talking about. We're just all learning how to do this. So these are senior services within 5 miles of where we are, or where you are, or where whoever's putting the information is in. All right. People have to, because I did this for them for 25 years, and I got their little information and I wrote it and I put it into the compilation myself. People have to be trained that they're doing it themselves. They can update it themselves. I used to only update it 3 or 4 times a year. Now they can update it anytime they want. They get a password, they get in there, they can do what they need to do to give good information and give new information. So, that's it.
I would just like to add, Susan, that this came up early on in the COVID Recovery Task Force that Councilor Bagley chaired. or was the council rep on, did not chair, but this was an early on need that was identified, that there were disparate groups in search of finding an updated way to communicate with one another and share services.
Yes. Keep talking.
All right. Councilor Moreau, and thank you, Susan.
Thank you guys so much for doing this. I guess I just had a question. If you're an organization searching, do you get the contact information to reach out to that organization, or do you just get basic information to give to a client?
Wait. All right, that was a good question.
All right. Once in a while.
Ready?
Every now and then I get a good one.
All right, here, I'm going to go into Gather. And there's the information for Gather. You can read all that information. There's a little map. They're going to move, so the map will change.
Yep. Oh, see, it does that. Thank you.
And there's their contact information. Sorry, that was the other part that should have been shown.
Excellent. Councilor Bagley.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see this. As the city manager mentioned, this is one of the things that came up early on during COVID, is that we have a lot of great nonprofits in the area, but typically when you're in a situation where you need to use the nonprofits, you might not be in the best capability to figure out what resources are available to you.
Yep.
And this gives the people that first give you a lending hand a tool so they can see where else they might be able to provide resources for you that are from a different group. So we're not duplicating services. So I'm really excited to see this.
And that was the Alliance for Community Health was trying to do that way back when. Let's not duplicate. Let's know what everybody's treatment plan is, or what we need, what people need who are seeking our services, and make a joint effort to do that. You want to do volunteer? Senior comp, they need volunteers for doing this if you want to be a companion.
Well,
This
Susan,
is why somebody else did this.
Yeah.
This is why I only have the index.
Well, Susan, I feel like a part of this was seeing your child go off to college or move out of the house with this effort. And so, first, thank you for the many years that you have been doing this work on behalf and laying the foundation for this to occur here. And then thanks for seeing the need for people that might not, it's funny, but some of the younger folks, it's easier to use one of those things than it is to, to look through the pamphlet, and being able to have that easy and accessible, up-to-date information at the point of service when they're trying to help somebody else. To be able to have that information is key. We're not going to be able to, in the city of Portsmouth, be able to solve all of these needs, but if we can play a small part in helping these organizations connect with one another to help the need in Southern New Hampshire, that's certainly something that I think everybody is proud of up here, and certainly proud of the work of the COVID response task force. So thank you, Susan. And thank you, Kim, for all of the work. And I think you did a great job
She was
demonstrating
wonderful.
it.
She kept me at it, and she.
Well, there's also, if you can handle the computer stuff, anybody can handle it. And not everybody has to look at it on two screens. They're just going to have the one, not even doing a presentation while they're doing it.
Right. And I thank you all for seeing the need for that and giving the funds for it and taking it to the next level so that it helps the rest of the world, in our world.
In our world,
Whatever.
yeah, it is the world. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, and thank you to Connor, too.
Oh, yeah, and Connor, yeah.
Connor.
We have email correspondence next.
Your Honor, I move to accept and place on file.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next, we onto the council agenda. We have appointments to be voted. The appointment of Heather Looney and Cassandra Lund to the Arts and Cultural Commission. The reappointment of Peter Splain to the Cemetery Committee. The appointment of Oliver Chagg as an alternate to the Conservation Commission. the reappointment of Scott Chowden and Corey Sumerian to the Rec Board, the appointment of Ian Hanley to the Trees and Public Greenery Committee, and the reappointment of Jeffrey Mattson to the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Your Honor, I move to appoint Heather Loney and Cassandra Lund to the Arts and Cultural Commission and reappoint Peter Splain to the Cemetery Committee and appoint Oliver Chagg as an alternate to the Conservation Commission and reappoint Scott Chadden and Corey Sermian to the Recreation Board and appoint Ian Hanley to the Trees and Public Greenery Committee and reappoint Jeffrey Mattson to the Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And next, we have a resignation of Susan Sterry from the Historic Cemetery Committee and the African Burying Ground Blue Ribbon Committee.
Mayor, I'd move to accept with regret the resignation of Sue Sterry from the Historic Cemetery Committee and African Burying Ground Blue Ribbon Committee with a letter of thanks for her service.
Second.
Some others might want to say something, but Sue basically got the Historic Cemetery Committee off the ground and did an amazing amount of work for that. Very sad to see her go from not only that, but the African Burying Ground and Blue Ribbon Committee, and wish her well, and a sincere thanks for her services there. Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I echo that thanks. Sue Sterry's been the driving force behind the Historic Cemetery Committee, and her presence will definitely be missed by the city. So thank you, Sue, for all the hard work that you've put into that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, we have City Council Member Councilor Denton.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move for a report back on the development of an electrification plan under BI 20PW46, Level 2, 120/280 volt single phase, and Level 3, 480 volt three phase electric vehicle charging stations.
Second.
So this motion for a report back is for the same reason I motioned for a report back on the Stormwater Enterprise Fund. To meet the Sustainability Committee's ordinance charge, we're planning on making recommendations to the City Council in the upcoming CIP towards achieving Portsmouth's Climate Action Plan's net zero energy goal. I believe it was 3 years or so ago that we added to the CIP $150,000 a year. The breakdown to that would have been $100,000 from federal and state funds and $50,000 from parking revenue to go towards public Level 2 and Level 3 electric vehicle chargers. In this amount of time, Portsmouth has seen the Bridge Street electric vehicle chargers be installed. I knew there was a lot of work done to laying the wiring, and it took some time to get the chargers themselves actually here. But I believe those chargers have been in the works since 2017 or 2018. So the purpose of this motion is to see if there's an actual electrification plan, and if not, the Sustainability Committee's recommendation will likely be to actually add money to the CIP for a RFP to actually create a plan for Portsmouth to have Level 2 and Level 3 charging locations identified and a possible sequence of events when they could go in. So a lot of things I just said there, but this is simply for a motion on a report back on the status of the development of an electrification plan.
Any discussion? And there was a second?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I welcome this motion from Councilor Denton. I think it's vital that we do planning for electric vehicles. We're already in a situation where we're seeing a rapid transition to electric vehicles within the city, and we aren't necessarily, I don't know whether or not we're planning for that fast uptake by the public and whether or not we're prepared to address a need. So I appreciate the motion.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next is Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you, Your Honor. In your packet, you'll have the nonprofit fee, impact fees determined by the Portsmouth Rec Department. These fees were voted on by the Rec Board and came to us on a recommendation. I'm going to ask City Manager to invite Todd Henley down. But I just want to reassure people, so for-profit organizations are charged by the hour for use of city fields. This is going to be for nonprofits, but we are keeping a stipulation in there that if any of these nonprofits were not financially healthy, then they could simply come to the rec director and we could make an exception, or they would be at like Todd Henley's discretion. User groups may request a waiver or extension to the impact fee. But this is kind of a way of just not putting all the burden on taxpayers. We have a lot more fields, we have a lot of lighting, but if the city, I'll let Todd Henley kind of.
I would, and I would just like to remind folks that at the March 3rd meeting, the council voted for an ordinance change to allow for the adoption of fees outside of the fee committee schedule meeting and budget process. So if this were something the council wished to take up, it could do so. So welcome, Todd.
Thank you. Good evening. Essentially, just to kind of talk about this a little bit more, all of our youth nonprofit organizations do not get charged for any use of any of the fields or the lights. So, as Councilor Blaylock mentioned, any private, for-profit companies, we do charge for everything, including the light usage. So, but this is just an example. As we start having more and more organizations like, Little League, Seacoast Lacrosse, Port City Soccer, they are having more and more non-residents join into these organizations. So, I've been told that a handful of years ago, prior to my time here, there used to be a non-resident sort of fee that some of the organizations would figure out how many non-resident players that they had, and then they'd cut a check to the recreation department as part of that. That hasn't been happening since, as far as I know, since about 2020. So we looked at this as a way of sort of doing that idea when we have some of these organizations that were not charging at all for any of their field usage or light usage, but yet they have some non-resident players. We're able to, we kind of looked at the level of what type of an organization they are, the impact that they have, how many fields they use, how many nights a week that they use it, if they use lights, things like that, and we sort of, we tiered the organizations into that aspect. One of the things that we thought was a good thing with this is that we're not trying to chase down anybody to say how many non-residents do you have or anything like that. This is just you start your season, you'll get invoiced, one-time payment. They'll know they're going to know what their tier impact is, so they can put it right into their budget for upcoming years. And I just want to give you like a quick example. So for, let's say, Seacoast Lacrosse, just at the turf field alone, this spring, what we would normally bring in if we were charging them would be over $22,000. We don't charge them at all for any of that. So we're just trying to say, hey, for the impact of the amount of lights that we pay for, the wear and tear on the fields, staff time to put this into the reservations, into the computer, all that sort of stuff. This is just a very minimal impact that we can then collect and hopefully utilize that funding towards the improvements to the field and anything else that might come up, porta potties, things like that we pay for at all of these different fields.
Any questions? Councilor Bagley?
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, I understand and I kind of acknowledge the desire to, these fields are used by people that are not Portsmouth residents, but primarily just paid for by Portsmouth residents and taxpayers. My concern is, as somebody who supports the idea of youth sports, and I'm looking at the list of, Portsmouth City Soccer Club, Seacoast Lacrosse, Portsmouth Youth Football and Cheer, Little League, Softball, Travel Basketball, Babe Ruth Legion, Co-ed Softball, Women's Softball. I don't know if there's enough financial benefit here to outweigh the risk that we might put a couple of these organizations where they just cease to exist. And I can't speak knowledgeably to that, but I worry about putting in a $750 a year fee, which honestly has a negligible effect on the budget, but then might result in the loss of Portsmouth football or the Portsmouth cheer team. And I don't want to put those fees in place if that's going to be the case. And I know there is, as Councilor Blaylock said, an exception that the rec director can make, but I don't know how much stress this would put on these nonprofits, these fees would.
Councilor Blaylock?
Thank you, Your And I grew up in Portsmouth, so I've probably participated in most of these organizations. I've also volunteered for a lot of them. But I know currently all of these are very financially healthy. They get a lot of donations. They get a lot of support. But like I said before, if they were not financially healthy, they could come to the city and say, hey, we can't afford this fee. And I would trust that Todd is, excellent rec director, that he would be understanding and wouldn't get in their way. but I'll just say that.
Councilor Brown? Thanks, Councilor Bullock.
I'm not entirely familiar with any sort of sports like this because this was in the sport I participated, so I have some questions. Do people actually give money to the nonprofits to be part of these groups? Like, do they pay fees
Yes.
in? Or, so it's not strictly donations that they get?
No. All of these organizations collect registration fees to participate in their programs.
Okay. And do they strictly use fields in the city, or do they use fields that might be outside the city as well?
So it kind of varies by organization depending on how wide of a playing area that or teams that they play against. Most are going to be right here in the city, but some do go out.
I guess I have a concern a little bit different than Councilor Bagley. My concern is I don't want to force a resident who's participating in one of these to have to pay an increased fee, but at the same time, I'd rather double the fees for the non-residents in using it. So I guess I would rather try to find a way to truly balance so that the residents, it's a benefit to, but to the non-residents, it might, they could cover some of our costs. And I don't know what that looks like, but I think I would be on par for something that could be a bit more of a hybrid.
Councilor Lombardi?
My take on this was that so many things are being downloaded from federal and state to local residents and local communities. I hate to download from here too, I guess. That was my first opinion, first thought on this. I know it costs, and I just don't know how you go about making a determination and how you do that equitably. I just don't know how you do that.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I did have a few questions. The rec department controls more than just the fields. So how does this impact usage on room rentals at community campus or at the senior activity center?
This does not address room rentals. It does, a room, if you consider a gymnasium a room, then it does. But no, all the classrooms, it does not refer to that.
Okay. So I guess my follow-on is there is a gymnasium at the senior activity center that is frequently rented, but I think is not really considered a gymnasium.
No, we don't use the assembly hall for sports related activities.
Okay, great.
Councilor Tabor?
Yeah, it strikes me that Port City Soccer Club and Seacoast Lacrosse, which my kids did, really extend recreation way beyond what you can do. They involve lots and lots of kids, and they run on all volunteer effort of parents in town who are working day jobs and have other responsibilities. So it strikes me that they're doing a tremendous amount of recreation for us. And there's value in that. There's value enough that maybe we shouldn't think about turning around and charging them for fields.
Any other questions? I guess I have a small one. Do we charge, or do the folks that rent out, like the aquatics or swimming teams, are they listed as non-profits that use the indoor pool?
They are, but we do charge them, and it's a different fee schedule for the indoor pool.
Okay. And even though they're nonprofits, they're charged?
Correct. And my belief in that is because it was run by SIP, and it was an independent fund,
Sure,
so
it would
we
be,
continue
you
to
need
do
to
that.
do it, or else we doesn't cash flow.
Right.
But I think what I'm hearing a little bit on the council, and when we talk about 2,000, or it's 1,000 versus, so 1,000 to pick on Seacoast Lacrosse or Portsmouth City Soccer, the high tier users. I think Portsmouth City Soccer is everyone but Rye in the school district, and Seacoast Lacrosse is the SAU 52 school district. So they're more than Portsmouth residents. I think the feeling is like if there was a hybrid approach that and also like the idea of like investigating how many, residents versus non-residents it's a difficult, onerous task to put on, it probably costs more money just to keep tabs on that than it would be in collecting the fees. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily, it seems like we're not changing the same underlying unfairness by simply charging the nonprofits and not charging the other towns, for the free riding on these fields. And so if there was a way to structure this as like the lesser of, either, $1,000 or, per resident, so they did the work and proved that, to us, I would be more supportive of something that, went into that. But, since we're already charging, some nonprofits, some sports nonprofits for athletic facilities outside of fields, it seems like we could extend this, and it seems modest enough that it's not going to impact, based on that. But I guess, quick question, did we talk to any of the nonprofits on this, or would this be the first that they're hearing? Did we interview any of them in terms of?
I've had discussions with some of the folks, but definitely not all of the groups that are listed there.
And was there a general consensus around this, or what was the feedback from some of the nonprofits?
From what I've gathered, it was something that they could easily probably take care of, and it wouldn't be that much of an impact.
All right. Any other questions? Well, I have, I guess, one more question then. So was there a thought to the previous resident, or at least in the rec board or with Utah, the going back to a resident-based approach in terms of charging fees per non-resident applicant? Or per non-resident user of the fields?
Was there discussion about it? Is that what you're?
Yeah, in the rec board meeting or?
No, because essentially this was to replace that idea. I think that the discussion was a lot about, these youth organizations, they're all volunteer run, and you get a new set of board members in, and then they might not realize that this was something that was happening before. So that's where some of it gets dropped along the way, and it becomes one of those things that we're trying to track down lists of non-residents and things like that. So that's why I think the board's agreement was that this was trying to make it easier for everyone involved to just do a flat rate invoice once a year, and it basically covers all of the stuff, either non-residents, the lighting usage, the field usage, things like that.
And then how much money would this look to raise? I think I saw there was 10 or so nonprofits listed, but how many are using the fields?
Everyone that's listed on there as examples are people who currently use our fields or courts.
Are there ones that are not examples that would be using the fields or courts? Like that are not listed as examples?
No.
Okay.
Unless it would be somebody that was new that came and approached us to use it.
Okay. So just shy of $6,000. Okay. We've probably already spent a lot of time on this for the amount of money that we're going to raise on that. But Councilor Bagley.
Thanks, Your Honor, and I understand the desire. I guess for me, I think of my daughter's lacrosse coach when she was in middle school. This is a few years back, but all the work that her coach Meg put in, and they were always fundraising and doing things to raise money in addition to the fees that we paid. And I just don't think the value's there for us to put this additional fee on our nonprofit sports leagues for $6,000 or $7,000 to the city budget. I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze here.
Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you, Your Honor. So we've always had impact fees. We've just done it the way Todd Henley was presenting. We've always asked you we create a lot of staff work, right? A lot of non-efficient time to track down these nonprofits, track down the new president. Sometimes the president changes every single year of one of these organizations. That can be really hard to track them down. And then to get a list, and then to still, build it. I think it was taxing on the rec department staff. So this was voted on, was presented to the rec board. The rec board did vote to recommend this to the council unanimously. And we all understood that if an organization was struggling, we have this provision in there that they don't have to pay this fee. But this was supposed to make things a little bit more efficient, save some rec staff time, give still getting some impact fees, so we're not putting the budget up and putting it all on the taxpayer. But that was the thought behind this. That's all. I'll make the motion to move to approve as presented.
One quick question.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Dunn. Is there a insurance and nonprofit status were required before this, correct?
Correct. Yes.
All right. Yep, Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I had one more question about intensity of use and time. I know that we've had challenges around just not having enough field space. Are we in a situation that any other group could actually even come in and have enough time to use space, or are we pretty much booked out?
No, not at this point. At the turf field, we were booked completely. Okay. Any other, I constantly have people reaching out to try to rent space from us, and we just don't have it. Not until the next turf field gets built that we'll probably have a little bit more wiggle room.
So as a follow-on to that, I think it's reasonable to talk about impact fees if we're talking about we're already in a position that we don't have space for anyone else to come in and use these facilities. If we had another nonprofit apply and we didn't have space, then we probably should be talking about, how we make those decisions and who gets to use the space and who doesn't get to use the space. And I think that becomes more challenging. So I think it's reasonable to look at it in a way that limits the staff time that we're expending in trying to assess what impact fees are now, if that is indeed, if this is indeed a way to reduce the effort, but still basically collect essentially what we were collecting before.
Counselor Tabor?
I remember from the rec study that some of these organizations, like the soccer, Port City Soccer and lacrosse, there was a matrix of the usage of the fields, and it was a lot of field use. Do you have is it possible to get a percentage of how much of our field use is in these nonprofits? I'm thinking in terms of the fee committee, and we're always looking at the principle that a fee should only cover the costs that it creates. So, I'd like to know what the baseline is, so that this fee doesn't creep up too much every year.
I mean, I would say that of all the athletic fields that we have that are usable, and I say that as in some of them just don't have parking, right, or things like that. So it might be a grass area, but it's not really suitable for like a team practice or a game or anything like that. Of the ones that are usable, they're used, and they're used quite often. So, we could I could definitely put together a matrix or something like that for future use. So that's definitely something that can happen.
Yeah, I just remember it as a somewhat staggering amount of usage.
Yeah.
Counselor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. Given that we have changed the ordinance so that things can go to the fee study committee at other times of the year and not necessarily be presented as part of the budget process, I would like to make a motion that we send this to the fee study committee for review before the council makes a decision. If I get a second, I'll speak to it.
Second.
Our process is usually that we do have fee study look at the collection of fees. Now, I know the Recreation Department has some exclusions, especially around programming, but that is in order to change fees around our seasonal programming. Because we'd be collecting fees on nonprofits and we're changing the structure of the way that we're doing that, I would love to have another set of eyes on that. For example, the fee study committee, because the recreation committee is not necessarily tasked with just collecting fees. It's not their primary goal. And so I think it would be helpful to have fee study just to look at it and bring a recommendation back to the council, even if it is to support this change.
Is there any other comments on that? Counselor Moreau and Counselor Blaylock.
I guess more if the information already exists that fee committee would look at, maybe we could just postpone this to get more information from what the rec committee looked at so that we just get a little bit more background on what the fees were built around and what, what that sort of data looked like so that we see the reasoning behind why that amount's going to cover something or it's going to help in some way. I think that would be, more helpful than having yet another meeting.
Yeah. Counselor Blaylock?
Yeah, I think saying that the fee committee is being really inefficient. The whole purpose of this was to be a little bit more efficient. We're being really inefficient right now. I encourage everyone to be involved with some of these groups so you can get to know them. I'm really kind of disappointed that nobody else up here is, just there's a lot of unknown and a lot of ignorance when it comes to these nonprofits. I wish everyone would be a little bit more involved or a little bit, pay attention to what the rec board does and not just cast off their opinions. But I encourage you to learn more.
Counselor Blaylock, we're talking about not a high amount of money with the 6,000 or just shy of that. The only concern that I have with moving forward with this fee is that we're not extracting enough from neighboring communities that are getting to use the fields that we build and maintain. And by having a blanket fee on this does not allow us to charge, the out-of-resident fee for this commensurate with the price. Now, I understand that before it could have possibly been a harder thing to track, but we likely were not we were not likely charging enough for that to make it worth that. And so that's the only information that I would like to see in this before moving forward. But what is what's the motion on the table? Is to Councilor Moreau, what was your motion?
It was Councilor Cook's motion to send it to the fee committee.
Oh, what was the?
Council Blaylock moved to approve as presented originally, and then it was Council Cook's motion.
Yeah, and then but then what was Councilor Moreau's question on that?
My question was whether or not we could just postpone the vote on it tonight to try to get a little bit more information from what the rec department looked at.
Well, I think we have that. I mean, I think we have what they looked at, and they're giving the recommendation and the recommendation of the rec board. I think there are some that feel as though charging the residents the same as out-of-town residents is not something that is supported. And the only reason I would not support that is if I could find out that we could charge the non-residents more money than the residents, and it would make up for that difference. I don't know the makeup of Portsmouth City Soccer or Portsmouth Lacrosse or Seacoast Lacrosse. And I don't necessarily think it makes sense to charge the smaller amounts to the smaller clubs. But if we're talking that the amount of money that could be generated on just, I think it was Portsmouth City Soccer was in the realm of $22,000 per the field. And there's a portion of that that's, a higher portion of non-residents at 30%. That's more money than we charge the entire program of this. And so that's the only thing that I don't see in this is an understanding of that, but that's more work. But we're talking about money and not just a nominal fee to keep people from using the fee. So I do have questions on that, and so I could see it going to the, I really, sending it to the fee committee is not necessarily the place to have that question answered, though. It would be at the rec board to have the question of how much we could actually charge non-residents, and would be more than this and be worthwhile to do so. Councilor Bagley?
Thank you, Your Honor. That kind of brings up a question. If we were to vote tonight, when do these fees go into effect, and when would these leagues be notified about it? How long would they have to raise the money?
The intent would be to start soon after this. So ultimately, springtime is the first season of sports. So we would be sending out notice of this essentially right away.
But on the actual impact to the clubs, I think that is the perceived impact is higher than the actual impact to the clubs based on the fundraising levels that most of the clubs do at this point. And so from a concern of whether or not this is sustainable, I think that this would barely cover the electricity that we're likely using in this, barely. Todd, would it cover the electricity that we use for this?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah. So it's a very minimum amount, and that's not the issue that I have. With that, I think Seacoast Lacrosse and Portsmouth City Soccer, I can't spend their money for them, but I do donate a lot to my friends' kids and their neighbors when they do it's much more than I think would be captured in this. Again, though, my concern is if we turn on a funding source and there's not a ability to, and these continue to change, I do think in the future we might get pushback from the clubs when there's more clubs that are coming in and wanting to use the fee and willing to pay the fee. And if we don't have a resident and non-resident program, there was a reason we had that. And if we're not doing that now because we're not getting enough money back from it, that's the concern that I have, is that we're not going to be able to justify these fees in the future. And so that's what I would recommend. I don't even know how we recommend this at the time, but to have a report back on what fee structure would we have to charge by the Recreation Board of non-resident participants. Counselor Bagley?
Are you suggesting somebody make a motion along those lines?
No, but, I mean, Counselor Blaylock, I guess the, wanting to find out from the rec board on, understand the blanket fees, the feedback so far has been that there's a concern about residents who are paying for the fields being charged again for the fields. Is there any way that we can figure out from the rec board to ask, how much money would have to be charged from a non-resident to make this equal or make it worth it to do this?
Do you want to ask the rec board how, to make sure we don't charge them twice, or to?
No, the question
would it
is,
cost
what
as
would
a
the
whole?
fee have to be on non-resident participants to make it worthwhile to charge a non-resident fee?
Well, that would change every year because the number, the participants in each program change every year. Like Little League, I'll have 12 kids from Rye one year, I'll have 2 kids from Rye the next year, or not Rye, sorry, Greenland. You know what I mean? So like that's a moving number. I guess in general we could, discuss it. I don't know. I'll ask the recreation director.
Todd, do we have a number that it would be, that we would charge non-residents? That would make it worthwhile to?
I think that was, again, that was sort of the whole discussion with the Recreation Board was to get away from that model that was used in the past and just make it a much easier way of being able to charge for non-residents, but not based on exactly having the numbers on all those.
But I think so some of the feedback is that residents would be paying again for the use of the fields that they pay for with tax dollars. And so wanting to know what the amount that we would have to charge non-residents to make it worthwhile to go through that process. That's the question that I guess I need to understand the answer around, because if we're not, there is not now, but in the future when there's more pressure on budgets and more pressure on fields, it will be very easy at your discretion to charge more for that and for residents, and creating a de facto additional fee usage on things that we're already maintaining and paying for in the city of Portsmouth, whereas we're giving a break to the neighboring towns because of the administrative cost. And so we'd like to know how we could account for the administrative cost and burden of that, and what would be the charge for those non-residents to pay on a per annum basis, knowing that it changes, what that number would look like. And I understand that we don't have that now, but that's where we'd like to be able to. I understand from a simplification standpoint, but I also see how folks that are, signing their kid up, they're already paying a fee in Portsmouth for signing their kid up to play Little League or something, to be charged with a City of Portsmouth fee, might seem as though there could have been another way to do that when they're going to be to charge the same fee as somebody from a neighboring community that is not contributing to the tax burden here.
I mean, that just sounds like a lot of work. It sounds like so we're gonna ask the nonprofits to charge any Greenland kid or any kid, at the signups, or I don't. The whole point of this all work was because the old way didn't work. So I don't want to go back to the old way. I understand your concern of, the perception of it. It's just a perception, and this is, it's politically correct to not charge nonprofits. But the thing is, we're giving them $21,000 off. We're not charging them $1,000. I mean, this is getting really complicated, and it's not worth the money that it would get. I don't. Yeah, I mean, if people don't support this, they'll just vote against it. But I thought this was very simple. Just going to these nonprofits, and rec directors. We have a very excellent rec director. He has good relationships with all these nonprofits, and if they're in hard financial times and they can't pay it, then I would expect Todd to be like, okay, that's in there. We could do that. I don't know. You know what I mean? Going through all this stuff. The rec board discussed this. They talked about this. We sent it back to the rec board. They're not going to really understand, they sent the recommendation to us, to the council. Again, this is a very small amount of money. I don't know what else to say.
Councilor Tabor?
Having listened to all this, There was a precedent that these clubs have been paying in the past. We've inquired of them, and the feedback has been that it's manageable. They do use a lot of field time, and it simplifies something that we used to do. There used to be a precedent that was a cumbersome precedent, and this is a simple precedent. So, having heard all of this, I would be ready to vote for it. And also, lastly, it's been a recommendation from our committee, and I'm a process person, and when a committee recommends something, it's worth listening to.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. Like I said earlier, I would support charging these fees. I just wanted to make sure that we were charging the right fees. That was my concern. But I don't have a problem with charging the fees, especially if it reduces the workload. The recreation department has been going through to determine what we should charge.
The thing I understand, and I understand the work that went into the committee to do this, and I understand the process that was there before. Had no question on this until heard that what we could have charged was $22,000, and we're charging $1,000, and that seems like a very low amount of money to charge for the use of the field, and the disconnect from that gives me pause about the future when there's going to be more pressure and more money that's going to want to be extracted from this on the nonprofits, and it will eventually be the residents of Portsmouth that are shielding the non-residents from using these facilities, and not having what a number would be in terms of a reasonable amount to charge to at least break even on this process from a standpoint of how many non-resident kids there. I guess I didn't have any questions on this until found that we are giving a discount of $20,000 to some of the organizations on this, which fine with, but if we're going to charge any of them, to have it be based in something that could be, that would be reasonable to expect. A person from Greenland, I think, would very reasonably expect to pay more money to be to a city that's hosting a sports team versus what I worry is that we're going to continue to increase these fees in the future, where we're not going to, because we're going to be forced to, because we're not going to have enough fields, and where there's going to be more pricing pressure on us to do so. But I understand, and torn because of the rec board making the recommendation and wanting to listen. I just wish we had there was more conversation at that point on what a return to the former system would look like in terms of cost. Councilor Black?
Your Honor, I call the question.
I'd like to call the question. All right, roll call vote. Oh, is there a second?
Second.
Oh, is there, wait, there's I'll call the question, I guess, is there amendment?
Yeah, this was the same point of order. I think there's an amendment first, it has to be voted, and then there was my motion on the floor, which.
Okay, yep, that is true.
I can just withdraw the motion. I don't think it's going to pass.
Okay, motion is withdrawn.
My second withdraws.
To the fee committee is withdrawn. Motion on the floor. Roll call to
approve as
to approve
presented.
as presented.
Counselor Tabor?
Yes.
Counselor Cook?
Yes.
Counselor Denton?
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock?
Yes.
Counselor Bagley?
No.
Counselor Moreau?
No.
Counselor Lombardi?
No.
Mayor McCachran?
No.
Oh, it's tied, so it fails.
All right. Councilor Moreau, Councilor Blaylock, no. Grants and donations.
Your Honor, I move to authorize the city manager to accept donations in any amount in memory for Chris Rice for use in sponsoring in-need families to participate in skateboarding programs through the Recreation Department.
Second.
I'll just say that Chris Rice was probably the most important member of the skate park committee. That park wouldn't be what it is without him. I the skate community wouldn't be with what it is without him. He's also my neighbor, but I was honored to get the pleasure to work with them and build that park. But yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Blaylock. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye. Make a motion to go past 10:30.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No.
Informational items to the city manager.
I have 3 quick items, Your Honor. First, a reminder to the public that the FY26 proposed budget has been released. The schedule of upcoming budget-related work sessions and public meetings at which there is an opportunity at each meeting for the public to ask questions and provide comment. Those meetings are as depicted in the packet, and we look forward to explaining to the council and to the public that what we've put forth is a responsible and comprehensive budget that level funds services. So more to come on that throughout the month of May. Number 2 is an interim report back on steps that new businesses can take to open and potential options to streamline the process, as I believe requested by you, Mayor. Some interim steps that we have taken involved a meeting with the Health, Planning and Sustainability, Economic and Community Development, and Inspection Departments, and we've looked at things we do now and how they've evolved over time, many to the good. We spent a fair amount of time on Health Department's really exemplary webpage, which hosts a restaurant construction guide. So we'd like to give that more notoriety and share that more with the public. A coming attraction would be to create a landing page on our main website to make it much easier and more top of mind for folks. And how do we best depict the process to help businesses better navigate? Something that some staff do now at the request of a prospective new business is that Health, Fire, and Inspection all currently have meetings on site with businesses looking to figure out what they need to do to be permitted, and that is free of charge. And what we need to do is just figure out how to effectively communicate this better. So more to come. We're proud of the work we have done, and we just need to do a more comprehensive and consistent job of conveying that to the public. And last, the third of 3 is that the Deputy City Manager for Regulatory Council, Suzanne Woodland, has been supporting the city's Cable and Broadband Internet Commission, and they are putting out an online survey to try and garner residents' experiences with cell service in our community. So we mention it here so that it gives it some credence and people have trust that this survey is legit and will serve the needs of the city to better understand how cellular service providers can do better for us. And there are certainly ways and areas of the city where that is important. That's it. Thanks.
Anything under miscellaneous? Thank you, City Manager. Wait a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Oh, sorry.